absolute gridlock. It takes about 15 minutes to drive one block. Ordinarily, this time of day, there'd be nothing near this kind of traffic. You see pedestrians filling the sidewalks, many of the businesses and offices here having closed. You see cars absolutely pouring out of the parking lots, contributing to the absolutely horrendous traffic situation. Many people trying to use their cell phones. However, cell phone service has become very difficult in this town because of the crush on circuits. For the most part, people appear to be very calm and collected. I will tell you, though, that as I drove, I looked at the car next to me full of some young women who I would guess were in their 20s, several of them crying their eyes out, obviously very upset as they listened to the radio and heard the news of what is happening in this city in New York also. Aaron, back to you.
Gene, thanks. Gene was in Washington this morning as she and the rest of the organization continues to gather what facts we can, what facts are available in the wake of the extraordinary chaos that has followed this extraordinarily horrendous terrorist attack. American Airlines, we are told, one of the planes involved in this was a hijacked American Airlines 767 out of Logan Airport in Boston. American Airlines will say what is known. What is known as you look at the White House being evacuated a short time ago, or is that live? And I'm not sure on my monitor which it is. I believe it's taped from a short time ago. In any case, American Airlines will talk to reporters in about a half hour or so, 11:30 Eastern Time. One of its planes involved in this, and we will bring that press conference to you live when it happens. Here in New York, hospitals are being overwhelmed. As hundreds of patients are being brought in and being treated. We cannot tell you, we would not even begin to guess what the numbers in this will be, how many people will have died by the time this day is over, how many injuries have taken place in both Washington and New York. But as former police commissioner Howard Safer told us a few moments ago, obviously the numbers are going to be extraordinary. Who do we have on the phone, guys? Just help me out here. Patty, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
What do you got?
About an hour ago, I was on the corner of Broadway and Park Place. That's about 1,000 yards from the World Trade Center when the first tower collapsed. It was a massive explosion. At the time, the police were trying desperately to evacuate people from the area. When that explosion occurred, it was like the scene out of a horror film. People started stampeding away from it.
Patty, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We told you there was a second plane that went down, this one around 80 miles or so southeast of Pittsburgh. We'll try now to connect with KDKA TV in Pittsburgh. Well, just so much for planning. We will try again. Again, we have reports that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area, southeast of Pittsburgh, about 80 miles. And at varying times, we've heard that this was a 767 and a 747. I'm not sure it matters which it is. What matters is that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area. The Pentagon continues to monitor reports that another plane, a hijacked plane, is headed for that area. All flights have been canceled around the country. International flights heading towards the United States are being diverted into Canada this morning. Patty, let me go back to you as we look at some tape from the ground. Patty, why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay, Aaron, I'm in the main building of Pace University, which is inside the fallout zone of all the debris from the two building collapses. At the time of the first building collapse, I was at Broadway and Park Place. There was a huge cloud of smoke. It overcame the crowd. People were stampeding. Literally, the debris was so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. I ducked around into a building that was on Park Place and Beekman Street. When I was in there, people were coming in. They were crying. They were wailing. You couldn't see anything outside. After the smoke had cleared a little bit, I came outside. The scene was like a ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. People were coming out with masks over their face, anything they could put over their face, because the air was still very thick with debris. The ash on the ground is at least 2 inches thick. It's more like snow cover, a very eerie snow cover blanketing downtown Manhattan right now. Now, at the time, I was back on the corner again of Broadway and Park Place. At that time, the police started running toward us, telling everybody to move who was left on the street. I looked up, and that's when I heard the, pardon me, That's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down. Again, whoever was left on the street started stampeding. I'm in the office. Right now I'm in the main building of Pace University. People are crying. They have gas masks on their face. Authorities are making people go toward the basement. They're just doing anything that they can to move people away from the financial district. But again, it is a very horrifying scene down here, very eerie, like a ghost town.
Patty, let me interrupt you. Mayor Giuliani is on the telephone, is part of New York One's coverage. We join our affiliate for that.
Mayor Giuliani, since we have New Yorkers listening, and obviously their thoughts are with the people who are down there.
Urge them to remain calm, to remain at home, or to remain at their place of business, unless they're in Lower Manhattan. By that I mean south of Canal Street. If you're south of Canal Street, get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It'll also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the urban search and rescue team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible. And the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet. But right now, we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of if there is, in fact, some system being implemented, what that system is, and where people are being taken? People
are triaging. People are being taken to every area hospital possible, even virtually within minutes. I drove down right past St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could see them actually on the street ready to take people, and that was within minutes of the first airplane hitting the World Trade Center. So the hospitals are ready. We'll be moving them to all different area hospitals, triaging them. The main thing is having those streets open so that we can get people in and out of the southern part of Manhattan as quickly as possible so that we can move them, to hospitals all over the city.
And Mayor Giuliani, we'll let you...
That system is in place. They're doing it. We just need the cooperation of people in getting out of there.
We'll let you get back to the operations there, and we do appreciate you taking the time for us here.
But once again, the only thing to do now is to remain calm and try to assist in the rescue effort.
Thank you.
Now let's pray.
That's New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani talking to CNN affiliate New York One here, saying that clearly there's going to be tremendous number of lives lost on these attacks here in New York, urging people to stay calm and to leave the area calmly. The area is in the southern part of Manhattan, way down on the tip of Manhattan Island. The mayor urging people to calmly move north. CNN's Jamie McIntyre is at the Pentagon. Jamie, why don't you start, if you can, at the beginning here as we try and put some order to all of this. What happened?
Well, let me just describe the scene that we have here, and I'll back up a little bit. But right now I'm looking at the charred facade of the Pentagon, a huge gaping hole on the side where the Pentagon heliport is located, the side that faces Arlington Cemetery. In front of me is a long line of rescue personnel with backboards. They're just waiting for victims to be brought out so they can rush them to nearby medical facilities. I see a few victims being treated on the grass outside the Pentagon. Firefighters continue to pour streams of water onto the side of the building, and huge black cloud of smoke continues to billow out. It is a scene of utter destruction here. I'm sure it pales in comparison to the World Trade Center, but I've never seen anything like this myself in the history of the Pentagon. There's been nothing like this. Again, a huge gaping hole. You can see the exposed 5 floors of the Pentagon offices just ripped apart. Our report is that an aircraft of some kind, and at least one witness identified it as a civilian aircraft, hit the side of the building shortly after the incident in the World Trade Center this morning. People who were in their offices nearby reported hearing a huge explosion, seeing shards of shrapnel come by their window. The entire Pentagon has been evacuated. Short time after this attack, there were urgent announcements made over the loudspeaker telling people to quickly get away from the building because they had reports of a second plane heading this way just 2 minutes away. F-16 jets were scrambled over the Pentagon. I saw several of them go by, but no second plane ever materialized, and the building remained completely evacuated as firefighters continue to pour columns of water on the devastated side of the Pentagon, and rescue personnel continue to whisk victims away. We have no report at this time of how many casualties. Clearly, dozens and dozens of people have been hurt, and we presume that there have been some deaths as well. It's hard to imagine otherwise, considering extent damage at the side of the building. And I can see just some of the windows side a stretch of the building, perhaps 40 or 50 feet wide. This looks like it has collapsed under the weight of the impact. Aaron?
Jamie, thank you. So we have planes hitting the Pentagon, or plane hitting the Pentagon, 2 planes hitting the World Trade Center's towers in New York. Alan Dodd-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Sabga and others have told you, all of Manhattan is covered, downtown Manhattan is covered with thick white ash and building material. The ambulances have been coming now from as far as Long Island. All the rescue workers are being equipped with gas or face filter masks. And firefighters have been arriving even by pickup truck. Otherwise, the streets are now deserted.
Alan, thank you. Alan Dodd-Frank in Manhattan. A little more on this plane crash, which is the 4th incident, if you will. There was the plane crash at the Pentagon, crashing into the Pentagon. There were the 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center here in New York. And we don't know whether this 4th one is related or not, but the report is that a 747 en route from Chicago to New York City crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the incident. That's what we are hearing.
Started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too.
Our colleague, Jeff Green, well, we have a little more sound here from witnesses.
I went to firewall company. The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know.
Get down! Get down! What's happening? She's right in front of the explosion!
I was in B Tower. A Tower.
What floor were you on?
B1.
What floor?
First one.
What happened? Tell me.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement. Came down. All of a sudden, the elevator blew up. Smoke. I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
Thank you.
words of some of the witnesses here in Manhattan this morning, and the pictures of what will, I suspect, before this is over, go down as one of the most horrific days in our lifetime. We're joined by our colleague, CNN's Jeff Greenfield.
Aaron, you know what? In 1993, when terrorists bombed the World Trade Center, their plan was to knock one of the towers into the other, bringing them both down. That disaster was averted, and bad as that was, in a sense, America was lucky. Another terrorist attack in the planning was interrupted to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel and submerge dozens, maybe hundreds of people. At the eve of the millennium, a suspected terrorist, was intercepted, you remember, at the Canadian border on his way to Seattle. And I know that not so long ago, former President Clinton, in a private talk to a group, ruminated on how lucky the United States has been over the years with the combination of luck and the skill of anti-terrorist people, to avoid such things. What we are seeing now is nothing less than the worst nightmare that one could imagine come to life, probably worse than anyone could have imagined. You may remember that Tom Clancy wrote a novel that ends with a terrorist hijacker crashing into the Capitol. The worst act of terrorist violence on American soil, the Oklahoma City bombing, killed fewer than 200 people. All we know today is that tens of thousands of people worked in that complex that has been destroyed. And I hate to say it this way, but this may be the day that America's luck ran out.
Well, it is hard, isn't it? I mean, you look out here, and you see the Statue of Liberty to the right, and these buildings off to the left, the attacks on Washington. We don't know a lot about who's behind this or what this is all about, but the symbolism of these attacks is extraordinary. CNN's David Ensor is in Washington, and he joins us. David?
Aaron, I'm talking to U.S. officials who are obviously working on who is responsible for this. Their working thesis is that this is overseas terrorism, not domestic. They say they cannot rule out additional attacks yet to come. In terms of claims of responsibility so far, there is an Agence France-Presse report in which a group with the word Palestine in the name claims responsibility. And there is also a report quoting personnel close to Osama bin Laden, the fugitive Saudi accused terrorist, denying that that group was involved. But again, U.S. officials say they can't shed any light on whether these reports are correct or incorrect. Usually when this kind of attack occurs, you have claims of responsibility from all sorts of people who had nothing to do with it. So it's a very fluid situation at this point. But the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States has been evacuated from its headquarters in Langley, Virginia. There are some key personnel still in the headquarters, but the operations center has been moved elsewhere. U.S. officials saying they don't want to talk about where exactly the headquarters staff and operations staff has been moved to. But that staff is focusing now on trying to find any shred of information that could help the U.S. government figure out who is doing this and how to put a stop to it. Aaron?
David, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here. As a practical matter, there are not a whole lot of groups that the United States government knows about that are sophisticated enough, have the kind of money, the resources to pull off something like this. Fair enough?
That's absolutely true. And obviously, despite the denial, attention will quickly turn to the bin Laden group because it has long tentacles. It has connections with all sorts of other groups. We saw at the Millennium a group of Algerians apparently involved in trying to arrange bombings in the United States, and now there is evidence being produced in court sessions that those Algerians were working for the bin Laden group. So that group certainly will come under immediate suspicion. There are very few others that could have pulled this off.
Right, I mean, just because of the enormity of it all and the sophistication required to stage these multiple attacks, this is not something some small cell can pull off. This is obviously a group or groups, well-financed and extraordinarily well-organized.
That's correct. Now, another thing you'll notice is that you remember the attack on the USS Cole in the Yemen harbor. That was the first time that kind of an attack using small boats with bombs in them had been used against an American warship. It worked once. Now the U.S. Navy has taken steps to make that much more difficult to do. Officials saying this may work once. They will now have to take measures to try to make sure that this kind of thing can't be done again. But these are apparently hijackings of civilian aircraft. So it was a sort of modus operandi that was dreamed up in some evil terrorist's mind and done on a massive scale here today, Aaron.
The Taliban spokesman.
David, thank you. CNN's David Ensor, our national security correspondent, on what he is hearing, what he knows, what the reports are as we approach 11:20 Eastern Time. For those of you just joining us, and as you can see on your screen, the Taliban, the government in Afghanistan, expected to make a statement soon, and we'll monitor that for you. For those of you just joining us, let me try and put as many of these pieces together as I can as we stand here in New York. At about 8:45 Eastern Daylight Time this morning, the first of the Trade Center towers was hit by a plane. It crashed into the south side of the tower. About a half an hour later, a second plane came from the right, and you can see it coming behind the first tower, and then it hits the tower, and you'll see the flame and smoke coming out, I guess 3/4, maybe a little more, up the tower. That's where this all began. About a half an hour after that, the first of that tower that is now, you see, in flame there in your shot, collapsed. The top collapsed. And there was an enormous, I don't want to say explosion, but there was an enormous plume of smoke, sparks, as we looked over from where we're standing. And then a little bit after that, and I want to be careful on time because it seemed perhaps 10 or so minutes, but I'm not sure. The second tower, which in fact was the first one hit, collapsed as well, and that's what you're about to see. Our reporters in the area say they heard loud noises when that happened. It is unclear to them and to us whether those were explosions going on in the building or if that was simply the sound of the collapse of the buildings as they collapsed, making these huge noises as they came down. But as we look back, the smoke now, which has gone from white to a kind of gray, clearing away, we are, I guess, Jeff, I want to know what's behind the smoke, but I have the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from even the fragmentary reports from people on the ground, stories beyond horror, people jumping out of windows because of the flames. The fact that this happened shortly before 9 and then the second hit shortly after 9 means that most of the people were either right in the vicinity or actually at their desks. So one doesn't want to be overly grim, but the fact is there were thousands of people were in these two buildings.
And again, 50,000 people come to work in those buildings. Many thousands more pass through those buildings every day. There are retail shops on the lower floors of the Trade Center.
It is where the PATH trains from New Jersey come in.
Correct. The trains, the commuter trains coming from the other side of the river from New Jersey come in and drop off and pick up their passengers, so it is an extraordinarily busy area. It is also an area, for a number of reasons, rich in symbolism to this city and to the country. You can see from where we are the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor in the scene. So that's what happened in New York. At about the same time, and again, I don't want to put times on much of this yet, after one of these hijacked planes hit the Trade Center in New York, events started to unfold in Washington. A plane hit the Pentagon, and then there was a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon has now been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The president, who was in Florida, went before cameras to denounce, as you would expect, and as we would expect, this terrorist attack, promising to hunt down those responsible. It was the president himself who first used, at least as I heard the story unfold today, the word terrorism. There was no doubt in his mind, at least. The president now is heading back. We are now getting a report from that American Airlines says that one of its flights a flight from Boston to, I believe, Los Angeles, correct me guys if I'm wrong, is down, or at least they've lost contact with it. 81 people on board. This would be the second of American Airlines flights to have been involved, presumably, in this event. Another flight, this one from Dulles to Los Angeles, is down with 54 passengers on board. So again, so there are two American Airlines, one Dulles, Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, the other Boston to Los Angeles. Both American Airlines planes reported by the airline to be down. It is also believed that an American Airlines plane, a 767, was involved in one of the hits on the Trade Center as well. We don't know if there's a reason why it is American and not any other. We won't speculate as to whether there is or not. We'll just tell you what the facts are as we get them, and that's what we have. American says two of its planes down, and I assume that is two other than the one that hit the Trade Center, and you guys check that out to make sure I'm right.
And we have a report of a crash in Somerset County, outside of Pittsburgh.
Right, I believe a 767, though we're getting reports perhaps a 747, which doesn't quite fit into what we believe flies Chicago to New York, is also down as well, and I do not know the airline involved there. Let me just go back on okay, I do now. It's a United Airlines plane. So we have a number of planes down, a number of planes involved in these attacks. The Boston to Atlanta, if I'm reading the notes correctly, had an American 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots.
Flight 11.
Reported down. That's American Airlines Flight 11. And American Airlines Flight 77, which is a 757 jetliner, Dulles Airport outside of Washington to Los Angeles International, with 58 passengers on board, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots, also reported down. And then there is this United Airlines jet, which crashed about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh.
We should also mention, I think, Aaron, that inevitably some of these early fragmentary reports are going to be needing correction, and that will be done as soon as possible. We had a report of a second hijacked plane on the way to Washington. Capitol Police were reporting that there have been no signs of that plane. We simply, at this point in this awful story, have to just tell our viewers we will do everything we can to report this accurately. If fragmentary reports need amending or correcting, that will be done immediately.
And I think in fairness here, there is in a number of places right now, perhaps 4 or 5, chaos. And numbers that come out aren't necessarily going to hold up. And in our reporting, we will be a bit conservative on some of this until we track it down. There's no point in allowing this thing to seem worse than it is. It is already horrendous, and we don't need to make it any worse by misstating numbers, and we want you to keep that in mind. CNN Medical Unit reports that the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, the Centers for Disease Control, is preparing bioterrorism teams to respond to the incidents. This, we are told, is simply precautionary. We have absolutely no reports and no evidence that there is any biochemical or bioterrorism going on, but clearly what is happening in every department of the United States government, and I suspect in every department of most major cities right now, the plan that they hope they never have to implement, the plan that they spent years preparing, is now in effect, not just here, not just in Washington, but around the country, because no one knows precisely where this is going. CNN, my colleague Judy Woodruff joins us from Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we've been watching this here in the Washington Bureau. I'm in the studio now, just a few blocks from the Capitol, from the United States Capitol, and the first thing I want to tell you is that everyone, I'm sure, on their minds is God rest the souls of those who've lost their lives this morning in New York, in Washington, near Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. It is just a story for which there are no words to describe. Here in Washington, we are keeping a very close watch on the Pentagon. You've been reporting, Aaron, and other CNN correspondents. A plane evidently crashed, a commercial jetliner crashed into the Pentagon earlier this morning. Approximately 60-foot section of this building, which is, of course, the headquarters of all the military for the United States, was on fire as a result of this this crash, and then collapsed. These are some of the pictures we've been bringing our audience from the Pentagon. We've watched people being treated by first aid personnel there. We have no information yet on casualties, on the number of people who may have been hurt or may have died in this incident, although emergency personnel on the scene have said surely there have been casualties there. Elsewhere in Washington, every federal building has been evacuated or is in the process of being evacuated. I'm now told that United Airlines is now saying that flight, can you tell me the number of the flight? 93 has crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, a flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. Now, we don't know if this is the same airplane that Aaron was reporting a little earlier crashed in Somerset County near Pittsburgh. Aaron had reported that some minutes ago, and now we are getting a confirmation from United Airlines that its flight United 93 on the way to San Francisco has crashed. So we now have at least two commercial airline companies in the United States. American Airlines reporting 2 of its passenger jets down, one flight Dulles in Washington to Los Angeles, and then another flight from Boston to Los Angeles down. And now we have United Airlines reporting at least one airline or airliner down with concern about another one. So the pieces of this story continue to come together. I have to say, in my 30 years as a journalist, I have never seen anything like this, never covered a story of the dimensions of this, and I'm sure it's safe to say that's the case for my colleague Aaron Brown and for any one of the other many correspondents, producers, and others with CNN and our colleagues at the other news networks. And I would just remind you that CNN right now has producers, correspondents, all around the world who are watching for any more information that we can bring you at this point. As Aaron and Jeff Greenfield have been saying in the last few minutes, everything we have right now is fragmentary. We are simply reporting to you what we are learning from police, from the federal government, from the CIA, from David Ensor, from our other correspondents. And I'm now told that former U.S. Army Commander General Wesley Clark is joining us on the telephone. Former commander of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas. General Clark, from your knowledge of the military, you know the Pentagon. What are you thinking right now?
Well, good morning, Judy. First of all, we've got to try to assess what's really happening, and as all of the news reports indicate, it's clearly a coordinated effort. It wasn't announced, and it hasn't been announced that it's over, and we don't know how it will finally conclude, so there's likely to be more trouble before all of this concludes. So we've got to protect the American people first. We've got to look after those who are injured. We've got to take precautionary measures to deal with future incidents, and I think all of that's underway with a lot of responsible action by people everywhere. The damage at the Pentagon is unclear from all the news reports that I've seen. The one report that said it crashed into the Army side of the building. There are command centers in various places of the Pentagon, and there are many other alternate command centers. So I don't think there's really any issue about the command and control of the United States Armed Forces. I'm sure that's very solid right now.
General Clark, why do you say there's likely to be more trouble?
Well, we're hearing still reports of aircraft that are out there. There's no way of knowing when all of the possible incidents have either taken place or been aborted. by whoever it is that's behind this. And so we have to be ready for whatever might happen next.
General, can you give us some sense of, clearly the United States has never experienced anything of this magnitude, but what are the leaders of our military, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense and others, what presumably are they doing right now in order to be on top of a situation where you have the Pentagon on fire, New York City in a state of chaos, and every federal building in Washington evacuated?
Well, first of all, we'll be trying to assess what happened. We'll be making sure that the protection posture of our bases worldwide and all of our units out there is raised so that we're able to protect our forces and our family members, and then we'll be looking to provide assistance to wherever such instance might occur. Whatever military capabilities there will be that could be of use will be certainly made available to the other agencies of state, local, and federal government who are involved in trying to deal with these tragedies right now. Then beyond that, we'll be waiting for the information to come in about who may have been behind this, and we'll be looking at what measures can be taken to strike and prevent further actions or in punitive retaliation.
Well, speaking of that, General Clark, wouldn't you agree there are very few of the terrorist groups, at least that we're familiar with, who would have the capability to pull off something this coordinated on this scale?
I think that's exactly right. There's only one group that has ever indicated that it has this kind of ability, and that's Osama bin Laden's. So obviously that'll be the first suspicion.
Are you, clearly we are all in a state of shock, General Clark, but is it fair to say that you're not truly surprised by this given what we've heard from that particular group? And again, we don't know who's behind this, but given what we do know.
Well, there have been many threats made against the United States and threats of terrorism, and we know that the World Trade Center's been a target. We know that aircraft have been hijacked, and we know that car bombings are used in many places in the world. And there's no doubt that for a long time there have been groups who have tried to target the United States. Normally, many times we've gotten indications. We've been able to take actions that the American public never knows about that have broken up these attempts. In this case, for whatever reason, we didn't have the information and we weren't able to take the actions to break it up.
And General, what do you say to those Americans who are looking at these horrific pictures that they've been watching now for almost 3 hours on television, who are thinking, will I ever feel safe again in an airplane, in a tall building in this country?
I think that will be one of the primary issues that has to be addressed by government leaders, is how to restore ever a sense of normalcy to the country. Will it ever be the same? And that's a question everybody will be asking. But I think it's too soon to expect any answers to that. I think we've got to assess this. We've got to track this down. I think one thing that comes through very clearly now is if this is terrorism and international terrorism, then clearly there has to be a much greater degree of cooperation between nations to deal with this. Whoever did this lives somewhere. He's supported by someone, and people know him. And someone knew that these events were being planned. And if we didn't have that information, we should have. And I think that's one resolve that will come out of this from nations all over the world, that more has to be done collectively together.
But in a large sense, General Clark, whoever was behind this has clearly succeeded in the most horrific and devastating way.
Well, it's been a tragedy for America, there's no doubt about that, and for so many people and their families, our hearts go out to them.
General, we're looking, as I'm talking with General Wesley Clark, who is a former NATO commander. He's talking to us from Arkansas. We're looking at helicopters patrolling. I believe it's the area around the Pentagon, although I can't tell by the banner across the lower part of the screen. We do know that President Bush was in Florida this morning. He abruptly cut his trip short in order, we think, to fly back to Washington. And General Clark, while you are with us, what would the plans be for the president in this situation without giving away secure information? Would the president necessarily return to Washington? Is there always a plan in place in these situations?
Well, there would have to be a plan always in place to take the president to where he can best control what's going on and monitor it and make decisions, and also where he will be safe. And you can be sure that there are plans and backup plans and alternate plans to the backup plans. There'll be no shortage of efforts underway to assure his safety and his ability to maintain the continuity of government.
And once again, just finally, General Clark, as we look at these live pictures of the Pentagon, describe for us what you know of the section of the building that evidently was hit by the commercial jetliner.
Well, that picture seems to be from the area of the bridges, the 14th Street Bridge, looking at the corner of the Pentagon that is opposite from where the strike was. So it looks like the strike hit between the 4th, 5th, maybe 6th corridors of the Pentagon. Perhaps on the Army side of the building, there are a number of offices there, administrative offices, where Army leaders and staff officers work on a daily basis. They deal with things like planning and logistics and congressional relations and public affairs in that area. And the Army leadership was probably close to where that may have impacted. There are a number of other facilities below ground, some of which have been relocated, and it's impossible to see from that picture what the condition might be there.
General Clark, any final word before we let you go?
Well, I think that we've known for some time that there were groups planning this, and I think the American people should know that the men and women in government and all the agencies have worked very hard and very diligently against this. Obviously, we didn't do enough. We didn't either have the tools or the cooperation or somehow get the information that we needed to have prevented it. And you can be sure that those men and women are right now resolved to do more and to be more effective. This is a national challenge, and I'm confident that we'll meet it.
All right, General Wesley Clark joining us now from Little Rock, Arkansas. He is, of course, the former commander of NATO. General Clark saying earlier, in his estimation, there is likely to be more trouble given the coordination and the scale of these devastating attacks this morning, September the 11th, 2001, on New York City and on Washington, D.C., and at least 4 commercial jetliners involved in these different attacks. Patty Davis, our Washington correspondent, here with me in the studio. Patty, you have some information about one of those airliners.
That's right, Judy. Well, United Airlines, as you said earlier, is confirming that its Flight 93, that's a Boeing 757, it was en route from Newark to San Francisco, did crash near Pittsburgh. It is also now saying that it is deeply concerned about another flight, that is United Flight number 175, a Boeing 757 that was traveling from Boston to Los Angeles. It said it is deeply concerned about that flight right now. We don't know the status of that particular flight right now. Now, the United Airlines CEO, James Goodwin, saying that the thoughts of everyone at United are with the passengers and crews of these flights, including prayers. United is not saying how many people on board each of these flights, how many flight attendants, how many pilots. So at this point, that is their statement. They're saying one plane. They are confirming Flight 93 that was from Newark to San Francisco crashed near Pittsburgh. Another flight deeply concerned about United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles. That's a Boeing 767. Now, on a typical day, there'd be some 4,000 flights of all different aircraft, including military, general aviation, commercial aircraft in the skies. As we've reported here on CNN, the FAA has issued a ground stop, the first ever on all departing flights in the United States. Also, the flights that crashed into the World Trade Center and also into the Pentagon, We are told by the FAA that that was the most restricted airspace that you can get. That was Class B airspace. It doesn't get any more restricted than that. So there should not have been any flights in the areas where those planes came down.
Patty, let me just ask you, the flight that United Airlines says it is, quote, deeply concerned about, the Boston to Los Angeles flight, are they confident that that is not one of the airliners that has already crashed?
United is not going beyond its statement at this point. They're just simply not saying, Judy. I think they're trying to figure it out as much as anybody else. The FBI involved in this as well, and they're trying to track this. Because
what we're trying to do here is piece together whether there is still a flight out there in the air that there are questions about, and I guess I don't have enough information in front of me right now to identify that. And you're saying the airline is just not giving that right now.
Right. Yeah. They are confirming that the one has crashed, but the other one they are not giving any information at this point. So unfortunately, we can't piece that puzzle together just quite yet.
Patty, I would add, as I'm listening to you and we're watching these pictures from, I believe this is the Pentagon, but I'm not sure. I just turned away. This is the Pentagon. I am told that there are wire reports quoting a senior official with the radical Islamic Jihad movement. Now, again, CNN has not confirmed this. It is the radical Islamic Jihad movement saying the attacks are a consequence of United States policy in the Middle East. And again, this is a wire report. We have not been able to confirm it, but we are simply at this point passing along to you as much information as we have. As we look at these extraordinary pictures, developments, the likes of which I think none of us who are reporting to you today have ever seen, I'm going to turn right now back to my colleague in New York, Aaron Brown. Aaron.
Judy, thank you. As we approach noon, about quarter to noon Eastern Time, it was about 4 hours ago that this all began. It's about 3 hours ago. Thank you. At about quarter to 9 Eastern Time, the first of the planes hit the World Trade Center tower, about 30 blocks or so from where we are. And you can still see now the smoke coming from that building. The first of those planes hit, and then 18 minutes later, and we can show you this one, the second tower was hit. That plane, you see it on the right side of your screen, coming behind the tower, and you will see the flame and the smoke coming from the front as that plane, perhaps a hijacked plane. We have, CNN's been told that an American Airlines flight out of Boston, a 767, was hijacked, and that was about 18 minutes after the first. Then as rescue crews began converging, as people desperately tried to get out of those buildings, some 50,000 people work in the Trade Center towers here in Manhattan. As they were trying to get out, the South Tower collapsed. It collapsed in an enormous plume of smoke and spark. And what we can't tell you is if there was a second explosion or if this collapse was simply a structural collapse caused by the plane that hit it perhaps a half hour before. And then just a few minutes after that, it wasn't very long, as you will see, it happened again. The second tower came tumbling down, and you can see that it almost looks like one of those planned implosions, but of course there was nothing planned, and it was not an implosion, as you see.
That was the first tower collapse that we just saw.
There we go. Here's the second one.
This is the collapse of the second tower.
And so now, as we stand here, both towers, the tops of both towers are gone. Behind somewhere, that plume of smoke that continues to rise over the Trade Center. What is left of those buildings, we cannot tell you. We cannot tell you. In Logan Airport, where at least 2, perhaps 3 of the planes involved began their day, officials now are meeting with reporters, and we can pick that up live.
That we've had various reports on to call these following numbers. American Airlines, 800-245-5555. 0999. Secondly, family members can call a Massport number 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's all I have right now.
Joe, you've got to tell us.
What flights do you have reports on?
The flights, I cannot confirm or deny any flight numbers because I have not received official notification on any flight numbers.
How can we get
all in? So it'll be everybody who's got a flight.
Okay, I do believe several of the media outlets are broadcasting several flight numbers. I believe they broadcast flight number 11, American Airlines. I don't know at this point in time.
Were the passengers hijacked?
Cannot confirm that.
Has the airport accounted for all outbound flights?
That's outside of the scope of the airport's responsibility. We're leaving it up to the FAA to conduct that activity.
Joe, what is the code? Joe, what is the code Fort Knox? We have reports of employees screaming Fort Knox around the airport at the time that the planes went into the world.
That, I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean have any connotation here at Logan Airport.
What about planes that are flying in here? Are they being rerouted somewhere else?
Aircraft were flying into Logan Airport. We did take some arrivals, but now since the airport is shut down, these flights will be diverted to Canada.
They're not taking flights either, were they?
Are you screening passengers?
We've moved them to another area, yes. They're being directed to seek either public transportation or their own transportation out of the airport. Leaving the airport? No.
How long do you anticipate the airport to be closed?
It's indefinite this time. We'll be meeting with the FAA. We'll be conducting an analysis of our intelligence that we have. We'll make a determination later on this afternoon.
What details?
Pardon me? I can just tell you briefly, we have shut down security checkpoints. We've moved everyone away from the boarding gate areas. We've increased police presence dramatically. We've requested additional state police be sent to the airport. And we've shut down some construction activities around the airport.
Is this the highest level of security ever, Joe?
Is another flight from Boston?
I can't confirm or deny that right now.
Was there anything unusual about the boarding procedure of this flight?
I don't have any reports that would say the same.
Are you investigating breaches of security? How are you getting to the bottom of this hijacking?
I can tell you we have an ongoing investigation right now. Just an initial investigation being conducted with Massport, Massachusetts State Police, and the FBI.
What do you know about United Airlines Flight 175, which is unaccounted for right now from out of Boston?
I don't have any, can't confirm or anything or deny anything on that. That's
Joe,
flight.
got a number?
No, they have not.
Joe, did Flight 11 leave on time? Were there any delays? And was there any conversation between the pilot and the tower that seemed unusual?
Flight number 11 left at 7:59. I believe it was on time. And everything went as scheduled when it left Logan Airport.
Do you know how many people were on board?
I don't have a passenger count right now.
Are you aware of any communications from the pilot?
No, I'm not.
Would his flight path to L.A. normally have taken it south or towards New York, south to the west?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that flight path.
When did the radar, when did the tower hear the fact that there was something wrong?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
You know what time
plane before it was involved?
I don't know.
You know what time this United flight left?
I have no information on the United flight right
How
now.
unusual would it be for New York that we're heading to?
Again, I'm not familiar with the particular flight patterns they may have filed.
Was it a non-stop flight to Los Angeles?
I believe it was.
What time, sir, were the flights stopped in Logan? What time? What time was the airport shut down?
I believe we shut the airport down to arriving flights somewhere around 9:15, and departing flights shortly after that.
What happened to the flights that were in the air? Where are they?
They were diverted to other airports.
How long will the airport be down? How long?
Again, we're going to assess all the measures that we've taken. We want to, obviously, the safety and security of anyone who works here at the airport, any of our passengers, is a top priority.
Do you have a lot of baggage that doesn't plane being flown?
That's Joe Lawless, part of the security effort at Boston's Logan Airport. A number of the planes that have been involved in this extraordinarily horrendous event today began their day in Boston. The Boston airport, like airports now across the entire country, is closed. Every airport in the country closed. International flights, as you heard Mr. Lawless say, being sent to Canada as they approach the United States. These are scenes. This is tape from the ground, and obviously this is unedited tape, so kind of bear with us. It's a little raw at this point, but this was on the ground at the around the Trade Center here in New York as the events began unfolding. As you can see there, you can see that huge hole in the building of the Trade Center, both buildings standing at the time. You can see that where the plane, it almost looks like it came through the entire building.
And Aaron, we should remember what Wesley Clark told Judy Woodruff a couple of minutes ago about how much U.S. authorities have been worried about such an attack, how hard they've worked to try to fight it, how something may have gone wrong. And I believe we have on the phone right now someone who, both in fact and fiction, has dealt with justice, and that's author Tom Clancy.
Mr. Clancy, this is, I guess, a terrible case of life imitating art.
I suppose you could say that. It's a noteworthy incident. I mean, it's not the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that's best left in a novel rather than in real life. Unfortunately, one of the problems with being an author is keeping up with reality.
But Mr. Clancy, you also are very well plugged into this world. From your own knowledge, how concerned have the authorities been that something of this scale could possibly hit on American soil?
It's Jeff Greenfield, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Jeff, you've been here to the house. I mean, it's. I had a conversation some years ago with an Air Force general about the possibility rather like this. And I ended up putting in one of my books where you go where a bad guy takes an aircraft into the Capitol building during a joint session of Congress, which could effectively decapitate the whole government. And at the time it seemed rather humorous. I said, surely you've thought about things like this. And he said, well, to the best of my knowledge, nobody in my office has looked at this, but I promise you Monday morning they will be. Presumably they've been, they've considered this possibility for some time. The big problem is a person who's willing to lose his own life in voluntarily in a terrorist incident. People like that are fairly rare, because self-preservation is indeed the first law of nature, and not too many people are willing to throw their lives away, and those who do it generally do it for religious reasons because they think there's something good waiting for them on the other side of death. In a case like this, that's going to lean people towards talking about, Islamic fanatics. But we need to remember that, Islam is a religion, and it's a religion with beliefs and not terribly different from Judaism or Christianity. Or they believe in a God of love and justice the same as we do, and they're not all maniacs. And religious tolerance is one of the principles of our country. We need to hold on to that principle very tightly right now, because it's the principles you hold on to when things are tough that really count.
Fair point, Tom.
This was an act by a small number of madmen, and madmen don't characterize any part of humanity.
Tom, it's Aaron Brown. When you would talk to these officials in doing the research, did they see an attack of this enormity, or were they more concerned with these sort of devastating but smaller kind of hit and miss attacks that we've seen over the last 7-8 years?
Well, you don't ordinarily expect terrorists to display this degree of expertise. Flying an airplane is not all that easy. Kidnapping or hijacking an airplane, particularly with the safeguards we have at the airports right now, is not a trivial exercise. But unfortunately, the security you have at airports is not perfect because nothing human beings do is perfect. Somebody thought very carefully and hard and long about this, and then they got some madmen to actually take control of the aircraft.
Tom, stay with me for a second. We a few moments ago told our viewers that United Airlines was concerned about another. United lost a flight near Pittsburgh earlier today, and officials said they were also concerned about United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles. And now we have reports that concern was justified. A second plane has gone down, United Flight 175. Again, that was from Boston to LA. And as you look at the Pentagon, which was also hit by a plane earlier in the day. Jeff?
Yes, Tom, you were mentioning that this is such a rare act, and yet we now know of at least 4 commercial airliners that apparently were hijacked and either crashed or crashed into buildings, causing death and havoc of an unimaginable scale. So whoever is behind this is of a dimension that literally dwarfs even fantasy.
Pretty much. I dreamed pretty big when my dreams, fortunately or unfortunately, didn't get quite this large. It's not, generally speaking, it's not credible to think that you're going to find, more than one person who's willing to do something like this, because people who are willing to throw their lives away are fairly rare. In this case, they got somebody who was well organized and produced a well planned and reasonably well executed operation.
Well,
now we need to find out who it was and then to go after him. But that's that's going to take time. But we do have the people to do that if they have the proper support from the executive branch of the government and from the general population of our country to identify, locate, and deal with the people who performed this act.
The president said earlier today, shortly after the Trade Center attacks, the president characterizing these as terrorist attacks and said that the United States government will do whatever it is necessary to hunt down those people responsible. I think it is fair to say, Tom, Jeff, all of you on the line here, it is fair to say that what we know is that this is an extraordinarily large operation, and what we don't know, in a way, is just how big it is. It seems that in each passing moment or so, we get another report of another incident, and our instinct tells us that they are all connected. We have a number of planes down, 2 American airline jets, 2 United jets down. We have a plane that hit the Pentagon. We had 2 that hit the Trade Center. You're talking about something that is, I think it's fair to say, Jeff, it is beyond anything any of us could possibly have imagined. I think that those of us who dealt with Oklahoma City, those of us who dealt with the Trade Center here in '93, as we both did, you say, that is awful what happened. And you look at what appears to be playing out today, and we have no idea yet what the loss of life will be, certainly in the hundreds. We know that hospitals here in New York are overwhelmed with people being brought there all over the city of New York and beyond.
The only piece of news that is the least bit, I guess, reassuring is that there is no report of any kind of chemical result. That is, the folks on the ground around the World Trade Center, the rescue crews, the survivors, there is absolutely no indication at this moment that there was any kind of bioterrorism involved. Not that what happened here isn't horrific enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just add on again, small, medium-sized pieces of information as we go. All airlines in the country are closed down. All airports in the country are closed down. We now are being told that the U.S.-Mexican border has been sealed. We don't know if that is just simply part of a plan that the government puts into effect under a worst-case circumstance. This is certainly that. Or if there is some specific reason why a decision was made to shut down that border. our senior White House correspondent, John King, on the phone. John. John? John King, can you hear me? It's Aaron.
I hear you, Aaron.
What have you got to report for us?
Aaron, I'm standing across from the White House. I'm told by Secret Service and administration sources that all of the principals, all of the protectees, meaning the President, the Vice President, the First Lady, and Mrs. Cheney, are safe. They do not want us disclosing their locations, but I am told by a senior administration official that the plan and the priority is to get President Bush back to the White House as soon as they believe it is safe. Now, there are both operational and political reasons for wanting to do that. The White House Situation Room, in the view of White House officials, is the best place from which to monitor events and direct any operations. That is a fortified structure within the White House compound where we know the Vice President was when everyone else was evacuated from the premises earlier. Again, the Secret Service does not want to confirm for us for security reasons, or administration officials the same, tell us where those people are now, although I was told a short time ago the Vice President is still in a position to be monitoring and directing the response to these developments, and that the President, who is en route back to Washington, we're told Andrews Air Force Base is on full alert. I was also told that there are extra precautions that were taken to ensure the President's flight back to Washington was a safe one. Now, you can read into that additional fighter jet escorts, Air Force One always has some escorts with it, that additional fighter jet escorts were put up for that. Now, the political reason they want to get the President back to the White House is rather obvious. The White House believes this has been a tragic terrorist attack, and they want to send the signal that the President is back on the job at the White House. Priority one, though, officials say, is to guarantee that he can be safely brought back to the White House. And in the past half hour or so, we have seen security precautions on the street, checks being taken out on the street, on the grounds around the White House. There are snipers up on the roofs of the White House itself, including buildings around it. And a military helicopter gunship flew over the premises not that long ago, about 15 minutes ago now, and then it circled back over toward the Pentagon, where from my location you can still see smoke coming into the sky from there. But we are told the Vice President is still in a position to monitor all this as the President makes his way back.
John, thank you. Our senior White House correspondent, John King. As John mentioned, the President was in Sarasota, Florida, making his way back to Washington. Whether he'll be taken directly to the White House or not is a little bit unclear. Secret Service wants to make sure the building is safe. It is, I would add, one other symbolic reason why you would want to get the President in the White House, and that's to send a message to who's ever responsible for this, that yes, you've caused extraordinary damage and a great deal of tragedy here, but what you haven't done is shut down the American government. The President will want to get home. Governor George Pataki of New York joins us on the telephone. Governor, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
What are you hearing from the Trade Center area itself?
Well, we're still hearing that it's a horrific situation. We're in desperate need of people to help out with emergency services. The city team is there, but we've activated our National Guard and our statewide fire and emergency services, and we're going to be bringing those in to relieve the city forces as the afternoon goes on. I've been in touch with the mayor, I've been in touch with the White House, and everything that we can do and everything that can be done is being done at this point.
Has anyone given you any idea of how many injured we are dealing with down at
Not
the
at
Trade
this
Center?
point. At this point, the sole goal is to try to help as many people as possible, to get them to the emergency services, to get them the care they need, to help people who want to leave the area to leave in an orderly way, and to make sure we do everything we can to provide security throughout the city and throughout the state.
And Governor Pataki, can you tell me the degree to which the state's planning for these sorts of tragedies, and there's obviously a plan in place, and New York is, because of its place in the world, is obviously a place you have to consider a target, whether that plan envisions something of the magnitude of what has taken place this morning?
Well, you plan for any eventuality, but you never actually expect to see something of this magnitude. But we have coordinated well with the city. We're going to continue to make sure we provide all the support we can. We do have emergency services and emergency transportation running. I know the reports have been inaccurate. We do have limited rail service out of Grand Central to the northern suburbs, limited rail service out of Brooklyn and Queens to Long Island. We're working to make sure that bus service, to the extent possible, possible continues, and we're trying to get subway service back on track. It's not there yet, but the coordination has been excellent. It's just in an attack of this magnitude, we just have to focus on responding and helping people at this point.
And do you have any idea how many people have been hospitalized or how many hospitals are involved, whether they extend beyond the city?
Not at this point, but every emergency service, every hospital that can provide assistance is providing assistance. The people have been just terrific in their response, and we're going to continue to make sure that response is as strong as it can be.
Governor, take a moment and tell me, not as the governor necessarily, but as a resident of this state, an important player in the affairs of this state, what you're thinking today.
This is an enormous tragedy. I have friends in those towers. I have friends who were there this morning that we haven't heard from. And our thoughts go to the people who are there, to their families, to all those who are suffering at this time, and we will be there to help, and we will be there to do everything we can to make sure that the support and the services necessary are provided.
Okay. Governor, thank you. Governor George Pataki joining us here. The National Guard has been activated to support New York City Police. Andrea Koppel is on board a flight with the Secretary of State. Andrea, what are you hearing from officials there?
Well, Aaron, Secretary Powell has been in Peru since last night. He was here to attend the Organization of American States General Assembly. Obviously, when he got the news of the attacks in the United States, his aides scrambled to prepare things for him to leave. We are now, as you say, on board his plane. We're about to take off from Lima to head back to Washington. While at the OAS General Assembly, Secretary Powell said it was a terrible tragedy that had fallen on all who believe in democracy, but he said that will never kill the spirit of the American people. He also said that America will bring those responsible to justice, Aaron. There was also a minute of silence at the Organization of American States, and Secretary Powell obviously had to abruptly change his plans. He was supposed to be leaving Peru later this afternoon to head on to Colombia for his first trip there. But obviously, the attacks in the United States have changed that, and he's headed back to Washington. Aaron?
Andrea, give me a sense of the Secretary's demeanor. I mean, we know this is a man who has been through a lot in his life, has seen a lot in his life. Did he appear shaken to you?
I would say that Secretary Powell is someone who doesn't show his emotions in that way. This is a man with 35 years of military experience, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former national security advisor himself, who's seen a lot in his day. And so I would say that obviously he appeared somber, very serious, but in terms of any other emotion, I would say that he's able to keep that very close to his chest.
Andrea, thank you. Andrea Koppel, flying back with the Secretary of State from South America. Our colleague Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we have joining us now on the phone from the Pentagon, our military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie, I understand you are inside the perimeter of where the commercial jetliner came down at the Pentagon. Well, it appears that we may have lost the phone connection with Jamie McIntyre. We're going to try to get that restored immediately. Jamie, are you there? Now we have Bob Franken, our Washington correspondent, joining us from the Pentagon. Bob, tell us what you are seeing there.
Well, what we're seeing, of course, in back of me is the smoke that's coming from the west side of the Pentagon, where, as we now know, a plane which is believed to have been a jumbo jet crashed into the Pentagon. It has left a hole. There was a collapse of that side of the building. You're seeing the smoke, of course, to my rear. We're reporting from an east side vantage point along a highway that's a major artery here. It is also a place where there has been a constant alert looking skyward, repeated concerns that another plane was heading this way up toward the Potomac. These have been concerns that have been out there for a couple of hours. None of them have been realized yet. Of course, the tragedy was that about 9:20 this morning Eastern time, that plane crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. You can see overhead frequently helicopters that are circling the area, of course, looking to provide some visual sighting in case anybody, any sort of invader, anything like that, wants to take to the air. It's interesting, these helicopters also will hover on the ground. There are any number of highways here, and they would be looking for suspicious vehicles, that type of thing. We are told there are casualties at the Pentagon. We have not been able to get an accurate figure. We are not exactly sure at the moment of the whereabouts of the Secretary of Defense, but the building has virtually been evacuated, if not totally evacuated. There is heavy security there, investigations going on as they try and find out what happened. We constantly see sirens and hear sirens and see ambulances go by, many of them from Walter Reed Military Hospital on the other side of Washington, clearly going in there to help with whatever casualties there are. We also have seen a couple of times F-16s, at least one F-16 flying overhead a couple of times. That was reported as to be the case of the Pentagon scrambling fighter jets in case another plane was heading this way. But as I said, right now, there has been no evidence of another plane coming this way. They're on full alert, of course, and trying to now recover from the severe damage that hit the other side of the building. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, I just want to remind our viewers that the section of the Pentagon that was hit was between the 4th, 5th, and 6th corridors. This confirmed apparently a little earlier today by Wesley Clark, General Clark, a former NATO chief. He said from what he could tell, it appears this was the Army section of the Pentagon, planning and logistics area where certainly Army leaders would have been working in their offices. I want to read for you now a statement from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, quoting, "We are outraged at this cowardly attack on the people of the United States. Our heartfelt prayers are with the victims and their families, and we stand strongly united behind the President as our Commander-in-Chief." And I want to clarify that this is a statement by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I want to clarify that this is from the leadership of the Congress. I misunderstood when I was handed this just a moment ago. And continuing, congressional leaders, we will work with the President to ensure that the full resources of the United States government are brought to bear to protect the American people and to punish the perpetrators of these unconscionable acts. May God bless America. And just quickly, before I go back to Aaron Brown in New York, hospitals in Washington dealing with the casualties from the Pentagon Washington Hospital Center, 29 patients, a blood shortage, we are being told, in Washington. So any of you who are able to get to a hospital anywhere in the Washington area, it is very possible that there is a need for blood to be donated. So we will just put that information out there as well. Aaron, now back to you in New York.
Judy, thanks. We now are being told that Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, has been evacuated. Again, this is another one of those multi-terminal airports. It's an enormous airport, and that is being evacuated. At least one of the flights, and perhaps two, if memory serves me, that has gone down today was headed towards Los Angeles, one towards San Francisco. We also have a report that Disney World in Orlando has been evacuated. Someone said to me a moment ago, before the day is over, everything's going to be shut down. And that seems to be where we're headed. CNN's Richard Roth is on the streets of New York, and he can join us now. Richard, what can you tell us?
Aaron, New Yorkers think they've seen everything, but they'll say they're amazed at what has happened, stunned. Right now behind me, what normally would be the World Trade Center is no more, a huge cloud of white smoke. And right now it's like a war zone. Thousands of New Yorkers streaming north. The mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, has told everyone to get north of Canal Street. We're several miles north of it. Right now, New Yorkers are trying to get out of Manhattan. There's a ferry on the west side going to New Jersey. It's really the only access out. The mayor advising that people should take the subways. We have seen dozens of emergency vehicles, hundreds. Firemen being bussed in, decontamination vans coming in, call for blood donations. New Yorkers, their faces, their expressions, stunned, amazed right now. With us, several of those people who witnessed some of the carnage today. Tell us what you saw when you exited the subway station due to a lack of smoke. Eileen.
It was very smoky, and then we exited on Church Street out of the PATH train station. I crossed over to Church and Fulton, and I was trying to get a cell phone. I was trying to get up the block, and I turned around and saw this tremendous fire. I actually thought it was a bomb. I couldn't see a plane, and I saw people jumping off the building. Many people just jumping. And in a panic, I had my bag and my cell phone and everything, and I was trying to find a phone because the cell phone wasn't working. everybody was screaming, everybody was running, the cops were trying to maintain the calm, and in that haste, people were stampeding. People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around, and the second building just exploded. And again, all the debris was flying towards us. There was a woman on the ground with her baby. People were stampeding the baby. Myself and another man threw ourselves over the baby and pushed into the building. I got up and I just ran. I ran towards City Hall, and then I said, oh God, why am I running there? And then I started to run towards the water. And then I was by probably Spring Street Prince Street. I was at a payphone and I heard the rumbling. I thought it was another bomb. I thought it was another building close to me. And then I just ran from the payphone. The man is grabbing me back, telling me to stay here, you're safe. I was like, no way, I'm getting out of here, go north. And then I ran into a shoe store because I wanted to call my husband. That's all I wanted to do was let him know I was alive because he knew I was in the World Trade. And I got my office and they connected me to my husband, and then we heard the second fall of the World Trade Center. And I'm astonished by the bombing. I just want to make a statement that these New York policemen and firemen, God bless them, they kept us calm. They tried so hard to keep us moving north, and it was just absolute horror. It was horror.
And when you look back there at what would be the World Trade Center?
It's devastating. I can't even look back. My 6-year-old just last week asked my husband and I to take him to the observation deck, and it's gone. And you know what? Americans will persevere, and I don't think that we'll stoop to the level of these zealot terrorist pigs. And we won't kill children, I hope, and mothers. But you know what? Whatever we have to do to eradicate the country or the world of this vermin, I just hope Bush will do whatever is necessary to get rid of them. And I don't know what the route or what the answer is.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of other New Yorkers here continuing the evacuation from Lower Manhattan. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Richard, very much. We told you a bit ago that the border, the U.S.-Mexican border, was at a high state of alert, had been essentially closed down, shut down. We're now told that the U.S.-Canada border is also in a high state of alert. So essentially what officials are trying to do is seal off the country. So if anyone is either trying to get in or get out, it's going to be a whole lot harder to do that. But what is possible and what is imaginable, I guess, changes some on a day like this. Jerry Howers, the former head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency here in New York, and he joins us. As you look out, what do you see?
Well, this is absolutely devastating. An incident like this will tax every bit of resource in New York City. Particularly since so many of the police officers and firefighters on the scene were injured.
Let me stop you for a second. I want to talk specifically about what you suspect is happening, but I want to go to L.A. first. Frank Buckley is in Los Angeles with us. Frank, what can you tell us about what's going on there?
Aaron, we just saw what appeared to be the worst possible situation. The last thing that we want to show you, in fact, people arriving here at the airport, apparently friends or family members of some of the victims of at least one of the flights. 3 flights were bound for Los Angeles, and they are not arriving here, obviously. Now friends and family are beginning to trickle in. We haven't seen any until this moment, 2 people just arriving here at the airport. We can tell you that just within the last 15 minutes also, this terminal they have begun a process of evacuating this terminal, and in fact all of Los Angeles airport is being evacuated now, we are told, by airport police, who we just spoke to just a few minutes ago. I'd like to let you hear from Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the Los Angeles Airport Police as to the status here at LAX.
Because we work with other agencies who are conducting closures outside of the airport, I can't get information right now.
3 flights were bound for Los Angeles that appear to have been involved today. What accommodations are being made for the friends and family of passengers?
That's being handled by the airlines. They're having a meeting now concerning that, so that information has to get from the airlines.
So officially, what are you starting at this point?
We're starting a total evacuation of the airport.
Will that include both workers and passengers?
Only key employees will remain at the airport.
This is the entire airport that will be evacuated?
Yes, ma'am.
Why
is
the
evacuation? Because the evacuation has been ordered. I can't tell you why, but that's how it stands now.
Is there a security threat to the airport?
it's precautionary at this point.
Have you ever seen anything like this before in Los Angeles?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And what is going to be your role, the police department's role in this? What are you doing?
We're protecting the public. That's what our job is.
Will roads in and out of the airport be closed as well? Will people be able to get into the airport?
Right now, this thing is fluid. We're working as we go with the changes, so I couldn't give you a definite on anything right now.
How many police officers more or less
Thanks very much.
here in the airport on a regular day?
Other agencies involved, I couldn't give you an exact figure.
Right now, there are other agencies?
Yes, ma'am. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
What's your name?
My name is Lieutenant Whitehead.
So this is purely...
That was Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the LAX Police telling us again that just within the last 15 or 20 minutes, an order has come down, a command decision to evacuate the terminals at LAX. Up until this point, of course, flights were not being allowed in or out. Now they are evacuating all the terminals except for key personnel. Also here with me now is Lieutenant Colonel Al Van Cleef of the Salvation Army. You have the very difficult task of helping to coordinate the grief counseling. Can you tell me about the accommodations that are being made for family members of Flight 11, 77, and 175?
We have 6 grief counselors on site now, 2 of the teams ready. We're waiting word now from American Airlines. They are diligently working on the plans as far as a private location where the family will be received. As soon as we're aware of that, then they will make contact with us so our counselors can proceed to where family members will be arriving. We've done the same thing here in Los Angeles as well as San Francisco and Washington, D.C.
Very difficult day for you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. That is the latest from Los Angeles. Aaron, back to you.
Frank, thank you. Frank Buckley in Los Angeles. We are in the midst of extraordinary national tragedy, attacks in Washington and New York, attacks on airliners, the dimensions of which are not yet clear, but what is clear is that this is a day unlike any other. The worst fears of officials around the country, security, intelligence, military officials, political leaders, worst fears being realized, being played out in New York and Washington, 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh where a plane went down. Other planes have crashed. We don't know the circumstances precisely. We now have a report perhaps of another building here in New York that has collapsed. CNN producer Rose Arce is on the phone. Rose, what can you tell us?
Yes, there's another building very close to the World Trade Center that was hit by debris some time ago, and it appears to be on the verge of collapse. Also, that enormous plume of smoke that you see that's surrounding the building, there are suspicions that it's not all smoke, but that there's a gas leak within that smoke. And that has caused a tremendous amount of panic in this area. The police have been saying that they're now evacuating all of lower Manhattan, and you can see people moving north in a flood through these streets. They're just filled with ash. You know, as you walk through the ash, you can see debris from inside the World Trade Center itself, a very, very eerie scene, pieces of paper from people's desks, office supplies, many, many blocks from the site of the actual explosion, where they now are fearing that there may be yet another explosion because of this potential gas leak.
Rose, thank you. Rose Arce, who's on the streets of Manhattan. Back to Jerry Hauer, who who ran the mayor's emergency response team, and I'm not sure I got the title right, but the essence is correct. When you all, after the 93 attack on the buildings, and you sat down and tried to redo a plan, which I assume happened, did you anticipate anything of this magnitude?
Well, we have plans in place in New York City for massive incidents, but an incident like this is very difficult to plan for, just because of the number of people that have been the number of responders that have been injured. There are
the responders, we mean police, fire,
EMS,
rescue, correct.
Right. There are literally hundreds of people coming from New Jersey. As you heard from the governor early, the National Guard will be activated to help with law enforcement to help seal the area. I know that FEMA will be activating their search and rescue teams to assist with going through the debris. This is going to be a long-term operation. It is going to be a very difficult one because, as you heard earlier, there's still a gas leak in the building, which is fueling this fire. And until the gas is turned off, that fire could burn for some time.
Stay with us, Jerry. Back to Washington. CNN Judy Woodruff. Judy, you have more here. What can you tell us?
Well, Aaron, we are monitoring, of course, statements from around the globe, and we've just, in the last few minutes, been able to get a statement from the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. The Taliban, of course, being the religious organization that is the party controlling the government in Afghanistan. The name Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif said in reaction to the news of these terror attacks in the United States, and I am quoting, "We want to tell the American children that Afghanistan feels your pain, and we hope that the courts find justice." Now, this statement, again, made by a Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, his name, Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif, he made it at a news conference in Islamabad. And I would just add that we're told that at the top of the hour, which would be perhaps 1 o'clock Eastern time, we're expecting a news conference live from Kabul, Afghanistan. That is the capital of Afghanistan, the Taliban being the controlling religious party in that country, Afghanistan being the country where we have every reason to believe Osama bin Laden, the leader of a huge terrorist network, continues to live in hiding. The Taliban has denied his presence there from time to time, but it is believed by those who follow the activities of his organization that he is in Afghanistan. So we will, of course, be watching that. Let me just... All right, Aaron, I want to go back to you now in New York.
Thank you, Judy. We have on the phone with us New York's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, give us your best piece of information as the situation right now.
The situation right now is a massive rescue effort that's going on right now. We're trying to evacuate thousands and thousands of people. We have as many of our police and fire personnel as we have down in the southern part of Manhattan, evacuating people, trying to save as many lives as possible. We've been in communication with Governor Pataki, who's gotten the National Guard ready, and they're going to come in and relieve us a little bit later in the day. And we've spoken to the White House, and the urban search and rescue teams will come here also to assist us. But right now, it's the New York City Police and Fire, EMS, that are down there trying to evacuate as many people as we possibly can. And we've asked everyone to leave Lower Manhattan if they can on their own so that it relieves our efforts. And this will be going on all day. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy.
It is that. Mr. Mayor, can you tell me, is it a... Are people panicking down there, or
no,
are they
people.
leaving?
I was, I was there right in a building that got hit by the debris when the first tower collapsed. So I had to evacuate with people, and we were trapped in the building for a while. And we finally were able to get out, and we all walked north. And people, everything that I observed, even though it was hundreds, maybe in some cases thousands of people that were walking down the street, they were orderly, they were calm, they handled themselves really probably better than anybody had any right to expect.
And Mr. Mayor, we were told one of the problems, and Lord knows there are hundreds of problems, one of the problems was that a large number of police, fire, EMS personnel have also been injured in this. Can you shed any light on that?
I don't even want to contemplate what the number will be. But when the building collapsed, we had a lot of our police officers and firefighters in the building. And I know many of them because I saw some of them go in because I was there, and I'm praying for them. I just hope they're able to get out.
I think we all are.
The losses to our police department and fire department,
Sir,
are going to be severe.
Do you believe that was there another set of explosions that caused the buildings to collapse, or was it the structural damage caused by the planes?
I don't know. I saw the first collapse and heard the second because I was in a building when the second took place. I think it was structural, but I cannot be sure.
And can you tell us how many hospitals in the city and perhaps outside the city too? All of them.
Right now, at last count, we were utilizing over 50. I think it'll be over 100 by the. And that was as of a half hour ago. And we're utilizing all of the hospitals in New York City. We're utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey. And the main thing we have to urge people to do is to be calm and evacuate Lower Manhattan. And as far as the rest of the city is concerned, just to go about their lives as best as possible. This is a I never thought I would see something like this happen. I got there after the first plane hit and before the second, and watching people jump from the top of the World Trade Center is an unbelievable sight.
Mr. Mayor, my colleague Jeff Greenfield is with us also. Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of, you've already said that you want Lower Manhattan evacuated, you want everybody else to go about their business. Are there specific instructions that you want to communicate right now to police, fire, everybody else?
Well, police and fire are there, and they're there in large numbers, and they are, first of all, trying to get into the rubble and the debris to save as many people as possible. We also have thousands of police officers in Lower Manhattan, and what we want people to do is to leave Lower Manhattan, if they can, on their own. Just to walk.
Sorry.
Walk. I just talked to Dick Grasso, who runs the stock exchange, and we have a lot of police there. They have 3,000 people there. We're going to walk them out. We're walking them east and then north, which is essentially the way I walked out. I was right below the World Trade Center when it collapsed, and then we walked up to Greenwich Village. People should walk out of Lower Manhattan, get above Canal Street, for safety reasons, but for a second reason. We need people out of there so we can get thousands of ambulances in and out over the course of the next couple hours. And the fewer people we have there, the more lives we're going to be able to save.
Mr. Mayor, are the subways operating?
The subways are operating outside of Manhattan.
Outside of Manhattan?
Outside of Manhattan, the subways are operating. A couple of delays here and there, but in all other 4 boroughs, the subways are operating. In Manhattan, there are significant delays. We thought we had the Lexington Avenue open, but it is not. I'm just checking right now. The Lexington Avenue is not open. The A train is working, and people will just have to test and see. The best thing to do right now is to walk. The safest and best thing to do is to walk to your destination. Where schools have remained open, and we've worked with the chancellor to try to make certain that the schools will remain open for as long as they have to help parents with the kids that would be coming home, starting at around 1 or 2 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, as you know better than...
The governor has mobilized the state in order to make hospitals available to us outside of Manhattan. Any hospital personnel or emergency personnel that want to come in and volunteer, that would be enormously helpful. But the best thing for us to do right now, we're trying to coordinate, is to move people out of the city to hospitals in surrounding areas, which we're actually doing now. So far, though, our hospital system is we're very fortunate to have a gigantic hospital system.
Do they have enough blood? Do they need blood? Do they need people to come in and help them out?
I'm sure they will. We're getting the National Guard to relieve our people by early to late this afternoon. They're being mobilized now. And 3 urban search and rescue teams are going to come to New York City to help us. And then anyone that wants to volunteer from surrounding areas, volunteer fire departments and others, we're working with them now to do that, to try to relieve our fire department.
It's a horrific day, Mr. Mayor.
There's no possible way to begin to describe it.
No, there is not.
To see what happened there is, of course, it makes you very, very angry. It's almost impossible to describe the level of anger that you have that somebody or someone would do something like this. And all of the good and wonderful people that were affected by this. There's no reason for this. There's no excuse for this. And there's something like this is just something you never thought you would live to see.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani on what was to be an election day. The mayor not up for re-election because of term limits, but the election has been postponed. Jeff, just step back for a second.
Well, that's
you talk about anger. And we stand up here and we look at this, and we've all listened to what's been going on now as we've been on the air for 3 hours or so. And there was a woman that Richard Roth interviewed about a half hour ago who said what I suspect most Americans are feeling right now, and some would like to say and can't, how angry she was, how cowardly this all seemed to her. Quickly, we go back to Washington and Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Aaron, government sources telling CNN that President Bush, who had been in Florida for a 2-day trip and who broke that trip off this morning to head back to Washington, will now not return to Washington. Repeating, President Bush will not return to Washington. We do not know where the president will land or whether where his aircraft will go, Air Force One, but we just are passing along this information just as soon as we have it. Again, as we were talking to former NATO head Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, a little while ago, he pointed out that there are contingency plans that the military and the security people have for the president in a situation like this, so we're not going to do any speculating right here about where the president might be going. Joining us now on the telephone, there is some information we want to share with you about aircraft in the sky that is, we're told, is safe right now. We're told by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they're telling us 50 aircraft are safely in the sky right now, all within about 50 miles of their destination. But in the meantime, we want to talk to Utah Republican Senator Orrin Hatch, who's joining us on the telephones. Senator Hatch, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And I know my colleague Wolf Blitzer, who's here with me in the studio in Washington, had also talked with you. Senator, you've been briefed by what authorities?
Well, I'm on both the Judiciary Committee and also the Intelligence Committee, and I've been briefed by the highest levels of the FBI and of the intelligence community. And I just have to say our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this terrible tragedy caused by a bunch of cowards. And there's no justification for what these cowards have done to purely innocent Americans, but I do have some information.
Senator Hatch, this is Wolf Blitzer. Tell us, I spoke with you earlier on the telephone, but tell us precisely what you are now being told in these high-level briefings about those who may, and repeat the word may, have been responsible for these attacks.
You're right. They've come to the conclusion that this looks like the signature of Osama bin Laden and that he may be the one behind this. I think most authorities agree that this is something that we doubt seriously if Iran, Iraq, or Libya would try and do, because they know of the massive response that we'd have to bring down on them. But there was no advance notice at all. They had no way of knowing that this was going to happen. It was carefully planned. And what it means is it seems to me that if that turns out to be true, we're going to have to revitalize Shah Massoud and the other people in Afghanistan who basically are fighting to get rid of this type of terrorism. And I think we're going to have to ask our friends in Pakistan to get, in turn, to be more cooperative than they have in the past. And then we'd have to work with our allies to have an international strategy to combat this type of international jihad against the West.
We're listening to Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. We also have joining us on the telephone Senator John McCain from his home in Arizona. Senator McCain, I assume you've been talking to authorities as well.
Yes, Judy, and I'm on Capitol Hill in Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes. The situation is so serious that words don't describe it. I think that it's clear that the organization and magnitude of the attacks required more than a few people to perpetrate it, and it'll take some time to determine who they are and who supported these attacks, but I think we'll find them out, and they will suffer the full measure of our justice. This is obviously an act of war that's been committed on the United States of America.
What do you mean, obviously, an act of war, Senator McCain?
These attacks clearly constitute an act of war. The unwarranted, unprovoked attacks against innocent American citizens is clearly an act of war, and one that requires that kind of national response and international response.
Senator Orrin Hatch, I believe, is also still with us, Senator. And Senator Hatch, you mentioned the bin Laden organization. Former NATO head General Wesley Clark also said to us about an hour ago in an interview that he believes that it's only the bin Laden organization that is capable of carrying out attacks this coordinated and on this massive a scale. What are you basing your information on?
Well, keep in mind, there are nations that also could carry out these attacks, but I don't think would dare do that, knowing that their signature is going to be figured out. We're going to find out who did this, and we're going after the bastards. It's that simple. And I just have to say that both the FBI and our intelligence community believe that this is a bin Laden signature. And I believe it is. I was the first to point out bin Laden to the Clinton administration and said they're going to kill Americans, and we've got to get on top of that. And I think we're going to have to get on top of it, because this is a cowardly bunch who will stop at nothing to, like you say, have a jihad or a war against the United States, and to do it in the most cowardly fashion.
But Senator McCain, I mean, there will be those who are saying the United States was taking all reasonable precautions. We had security at airports, metal detectors, and so forth and so on. How much more is going to have to be done to prevent something like these things from happening again?
Judy, I don't think our lifestyles will be the same for a long time, since it was before these attacks, as far as use of transportation, particularly airports, are concerned. You know, there have been warnings about whether our security was good enough and whether the proper measures were being taken. I'm sure that'll all be reviewed. By the way, I have no information as to who caused this, and I hesitate to speculate, but I am confident that the President of the United States will lead us, and we will find out who has carried out these acts. And I think it's a little premature to make that determination until we have the hard facts, but I'm sure that we'll get them. The other aspect of this is that it may highlight over time the need for more human intelligence. We have very good technical intelligence capabilities, satellites, etc., but for many years we haven't had the kind of human intelligence which determines motivations before actions are taken.
I'm going to interrupt you, Senator McCain. These are the first pictures we have in. This is from Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This is where the United Airlines flight, I believe it is 176, went down. I'm sorry, I'm correcting. United Airlines 93. This was a Boeing 757 bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. It crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, near the town of Shanksville, south of Pittsburgh. We're told about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania. It is not known how many passengers or crew were on board, although initial reports indicated no survivors. Again, these are the first pictures we have coming in from WTAJ there in the Pittsburgh area. United Airlines telling us earlier they had lost this flight, and they knew that it had crashed near Pittsburgh. There is a second United Airlines flight, the Boeing 767 Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles, has crashed. The airline's still telling us at this point that they do not know where. We don't have information on the number of people aboard. It is possible, but not confirmed, that this would have been the second plane to hit the World Trade Center. Now again, 2 United Airlines flights, and in addition to American Airlines flights, the Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, this was a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 crew members, 2 pilots. This is believed to be one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. All 4 of these planes that we're describing to you now, these flights, all headed to California. The second American Airlines Flight 77, this is a Boeing 757, left Dulles Airport near Washington on its way to Los Angeles. It had 58 passengers on board, 4 crew, 2 pilots. This plane unaccounted for. However, a commercial jet was seen crashing into the Pentagon a few hours ago, and it is believed that this could have been the one, but again, not confirmed. So 2 commercial airliners, American Airlines, 2 United Airlines. And I would just add at this point, because to be reassuring to some extent to those of you who are watching, we've been reporting that all flights within the United States have been canceled. There's been a complete hold down on all commercial travel. However, there were planes that were already in the air when these terrible incidents took place this morning. And as of a few moments ago, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, was reporting that there were still 50 aircraft in the skies. Now, some of those may have landed in the last few minutes, but that was the information as of a few minutes ago. All of them were said to be within 50 or so miles of their destination. Now, I'm getting new information in my ear. Now, reporting our congressional correspondent, Kate Snow, you're looking at a picture of the Pentagon live. There's still smoke billowing out of our military command center in the United States. As we look at these pictures, I'm going to turn it over right now to our congressional correspondent, Kate Snow, who has with her 2 members of Congress. Kate?
Judy, it's been a bit difficult to get in touch with members of Congress. As we've been reporting, the Capitol has been shut down. You can see it behind me here. You can see that everything's fine there, but it is in a state of lockdown. They've evacuated the Capitol. Joining me here on the roof of a church, I might add, we've managed to get up on the roof here to get a vantage point, is Congressman Curt Weldon, a Republican from Pennsylvania, around the Philadelphia area, not exactly where that video that we just saw, the other end of the state, and also Congressman Ed Schrock from Virginia Beach, from the state of Virginia, also a Republican. You both serve on the Armed Services Committee. In fact, you were in the middle of a briefing. You were about to talk to reporters about the need for more money for our military. Let me start with you, Congressman Weldon. You've been talking to me up here. You've been expressing outrage at all of this. You've been saying this is a failure of the U.S. intelligence system.
It's a failure of our intelligence system. I asked the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Capitol just 45 minutes ago in a meeting with 70 senators and House members, how much advance notice did you have? He said none. There was no intelligence. Our FBI and our CIA are there to intercept raw data. This is a massive operation. And it's a failure that was caused by a lack of resources and by a complacency that set in America over the past 10 years. A complacency that convinced all of us that with the demise of the Soviet Union, there were no more threats. It's a tragedy that it took the loss of thousands of lives to wake this country up and realize that our #1 responsibility is not education, and I'm a teacher, and it's not health care, I'm married to a nurse. It is, in fact, the security and the safety of the American people. And today, our government failed the American people.
Congressman Schrock, how much information have you as a member of Congress been able to get? I know that the members have been milling around here trying to get information. Have you been able to get information?
Not a whole lot. The most information we got was when we went to the U.S. Capitol Police headquarters, and they were piecing together what had happened and trying to feed us as they got that, but nothing substantive. It seems like there's no game plan in operation.
Do the two of you know why you were evacuated from the U.S. Capitol?
Absolutely. I talked to Bill Livingood, the Sergeant-at-Arms in the Capitol, and he said, Kurt, we've been told that a plane is taken off from Reagan, and we think it may be heading toward the Capitol. I mean, they've hit our economic center, the World Trade Center, they hit our Pentagon, they hit our State Department. So the obvious next item you'd like to hit is the U.S. Capitol and perhaps the Supreme Court.
And obviously those are unconfirmed reports that any plane, but there were rumors here for a good 2 hours that there were potentially planes headed this direction.
Now we're in total lockdown, as you said, and members are basically scattered around the city, but we're going to get back to work, because we're going to convince these cowards that America doesn't back down, that our government will continue to operate in spite of these terrorist activities.
You said we're at war.
We're at war. We're absolutely at war. This is 21st century war. These are the kinds of activities that we expect from cowards and terrorist groups.
I need to go back to Judy Woodruff now in Washington. Judy?
All right, Kate, thank you. And I want to tell our viewers that we do know now that President Bush has landed near Shreveport, Louisiana, at Barksdale Air Force Base. We're told that he is talking to reporters. There may be a statement from the president, from the White House there on the ground. And one other item here from Washington before I turn it back over to Aaron Brown. In New York, 34 Pentagon victims at least being treated at 3 Washington hospitals. No word on fatalities. Aaron?
Judy, in the area, I guess, of practical information, and we talked to the mayor about this a little bit ago, there is now in New York and in northern New Jersey a critical shortage of blood, a desperate need for blood. We would remind people that giving blood is perfectly safe and on a day like today, absolutely necessary. And so if that's something you can do to help out in the midst of this extraordinary tragedy, you might consider doing that. On the phone with us, James Sanders, who's with Bellevue Hospital, one of the major hospitals here in New York. Mr. Sanders, what can you tell us about the situation there?
Hi, it's Hillary Lane reporting that Mr. Sanders was called back into the command center, but I can fill you in on the briefing that he just gave us. This is the largest emergency and trauma unit in New York City and the second largest emergency unit in the country. They say they are underutilized right now, while the hospitals downtown closer to the Trade Center are absolutely overwhelmed. So they have put out a call to EMS saying, bring people in here. It is an emergency call. What I have seen at this point are some patients staggering and being helped in, nobody in apparently critical condition. The hospital tells us that they've had 65 minor injuries. Those are broken bones, internal injuries, smoke inhalation cases. There have been 10 major...
Hillary, I need to interrupt you.
One person brought in.
Hillary, I need to interrupt you. This is a Taliban spokesman talking now in Kabul, I believe. This is coming to us by video phone from Afghanistan. And I am not hearing, and perhaps you guys are, but I am not hearing him.
We should remind our viewers that Afghanistan was one of the sites that was hit 3 years ago by the United States.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has already explicitly said its standpoint or its position about terrorism.
The terrorism ټول انواع او ډولونه لکه څنګه چې په افغانستان کې هم ورانه پیش کړي دي او دلته موږ همیشه د تروریزم ښکار شوي یو دلته موږ غندلې او په نړیوال سطح باندې هم د دې غندنه کوو.
We have criticized all forms of criticism as Afghanistan has itself faced and has become the victim of terrorism, and you are now criticizing these kind of acts.
Terrorism یو ویرونکې داراچونکې او نفرت پېښونکې لاره ده.
Terrorism is a terrifying and hateful hatred or hateful method.
او دغه پیښه چې سوی د بشري پلوه خورا پراخه او لوی ناورین دی.
And this incident is from the humanitarian point of view surely a very vast and very terrifying incident.
Any question?
Any question?
Question, please. Have you received any kind of information, any kind of communication from the United States or any other organization?
The America Mutahida Ayalati یا لومړی قانون کوم رابطه درسره سره ده؟
نه تر اوسه پورې چا کومه رابطه نه ده کړې او اوس تر ټولو مهمه خبره ده چې هغوی په ژغورنه باندې اخته دي. کېدای شي چې یوازې هغوی ته د تسلیت پیغامونه تللي وي او دا چې اسلامي امارت سره چا تماس نیولی دا خبره تر اوسه پورې نه ده.
No contact up to now. They might be busy or surely they are busy in the rescue operation. So they need condolence, but up to now, no communication from him.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks on the United States?
Taliban په مرحله واره توګه په امریکا باندې دغه حملې وکړي.
موږ د توریزم ټول انواع همیشه غندلې ده. د پخوا څخه په دې باره کې پالیسي ښکاره وه.
Our policy was very clear from the very beginning, and we have criticized, and even now we criticize terrorism in all its forms.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden last year, his kisan da ya kuma kisan da last year da na tasiri da da
اوس پورې چا په هغه باندې رسمي تور هم نه دی لګولی.
No, up till now, no one has blamed or accused him formally.
The Taliban have said that they will maintain Mr. bin Laden without communication, unable to communicate. Can you be convinced at this time that your policy of keeping him without communication has been effective in recent months?
طالبان ژمنه کړې وه چې اسامه بن لادن سره به هر قسم ته اتصالاتي امکانات به ځین لري کړي. تاسو دا خبره تاییدوئ چې اوس هم هغه پالیسي په دې باندې عملي ده؟
موږ په پالیسۍ کې کوم تغیر نه و راغلی.
No change in our policy in this regard.
Do you think the policy is working, Mr. Mutwakil?
او دا پالیسي کار هم کوي؟ اثر یې کړی ده؟
طبیعي خبره ده.
نه کوي.
Suspicions obviously turn to Osama bin Laden. In the media, he's been mentioned as possibly having a hand in this. Are you concerned that Afghanistan could be on the receiving end of recrimination, big reprisals, of responding back?
توجه یا ګمان ته راوړي مطبوعاتو یا میډیا د منهم اخیسته ده. آیا تاسو څه توقع کوئ چې افغانستان د دې عکس العمل ویني د عکس العمل هدف وګوري.
فکر کوم چې دا غنوم اخستې هم یوازې به د پخوا څخه چې ټول په هغه تفسیرو کې ډېر نوم راتلی خلا مخصوي.
I think that even if someone has taken his name in the media, might be just because his name was repeatedly mentioned in the past in the comments. Just for this reason, his name might have been repeated.
Just the second half of the question, though, are you concerned that Afghanistan could receive reprised attacks?
We don't see or foresee any difficulty in this regard because there is no argument or no reason for it.
If it were to happen, if there were to be attacks, what would the implications be of such a situation?
If there were attacks from...
As Jonathan said, if there were to be reprisals against Afghanistan, what would the implications of that be?
هغه به د هغه وخت سره ګورو خو مخکې وایي چې ټول انواع د تروریزم هغه په دولتي شکل باندې که چېرته یو هیواد بل هیواد ولید طبعا هغه دولتي تروریزم.
It is a little bit earlier to say at this stage, but as we said that we criticize all forms of criticism. So if Afghanistan is attacked, then we can call it state terrorism.
There's also been concerns expressed about Arab mercenaries fighters in Afghanistan and allegations that there's maybe an Arab connection to these acts of terrorism have also been raised. Can you talk to those concerns? Can you rule out any Arab links?
Afghanistan ki Arabi atba ya bazı da Sikh grupuna چې له دنیا خطر احساسوي تاسو د یو لاس درلودنه په دې پیښه کې هم ردوي.
زه فکر کوم چې دا پیښه ډېره لو پیښه ده او دا به داسې چا پسې منسوبول چې زړه ته مو نه لوېږي چې دا کار وکړي دا به کېدای شي چې یو ناانصافي وي یو څوم تخمین ونی.
It is a very big and enormous incident. So just to connect it with some people that even one's logic cannot even accept it. So in my opinion, it might not be a justifying.
Mr. Madhukil, are you surprised that the United States has received this sort of attack?
د امریکا متحده ایالاتو چې د داسې حملاتو هدف وګرځېده تاسو دې باندې حیران شوي یاستئ؟
د دې خبر ده چې د خپل نوې دا پیښه کېدای شي د امریکا په تاریخ کې ډېره لویه پیښه وي د هر چا لپاره طبیعي خبر د حیرانۍ وړ ده.
Naturally, because this might be the only and the unique kind of incident in the history of the United States. So, like anyone is also...
What I'm getting at is do you think the United States has perhaps invited this, given its policies around the world and the growing resentment that some forces feel towards the United States? So what I'm suggesting is that the United States is...
It's a Taliban official in Kabul. The relevance here, of course, is that the United States government has blamed the Afghani government for harboring Osama bin Laden, who may or may not be responsible for the events that have happened here in the country today, and therefore the Taliban response. The president, who was in Sarasota, Florida, when President Bush, when the first attack on the Trade Center took place, issued a statement then. He left Sarasota. He is not going back to the White House, at least not yet, but he has told reporters, quote, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts." The president said the U.S. military has been put on a high alert status and said he had taken security precautions to ensure the government continues to function. And as we said, the president at this moment is not going back to Washington. He has been taken elsewhere for his own safety. There is no reason, by the way, at this point to believe there are continuing threats, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, and the Secret Service is taking no chances, and we can't recall anything even approaching that. We also have a report coming out of London from the Associated Press that followers of Osama bin Laden had warned 3 weeks ago that they would carry out a huge and unprecedented attack on U.S. interests. That, according to a London-based Arab journalist. He adds, they said it would be huge and unprecedented, but did not specify what it was. And we will not assume that this is what it was. But obviously, a lot of people are wondering. Joining us on the phone, Richard Holbrooke, former American ambassador to the United Nations, Robert Gates, former head of the CIA, and they join us. Mr. Gates, let me start with you because I suspect that millions of Americans right now are asking, how could something like this happen? How could it happen?
I think that we have to start by acknowledging that we've been both fortunate and capable in the past. This is not the first major attack like this that has been planned. Several years ago, there was a plot to bring down 11 American jumbo jets in Asia that the FBI and U.S. intelligence thwarted, and there have been some other major attacks. So I think that when you have a free and open country as we do, we are vulnerable to this sort of thing, and it is the face of this term that people have been talking about for several years of asymmetric warfare, and it is a way of getting at us, the most powerful military nation in the world, in ways in which we're vulnerable.
Sir, we heard, and perhaps it's given our proximity to the events, it's a little bit unseemly, but we heard a member of Congress but a few minutes ago essentially say that the American government failed its people. Is it fair to say that this is a failure, or we just can't know it all?
Well, personally, I believe that for people to start blaming people and organizations at this point is highly premature. I think that we need to find out just exactly how bad this situation is and deal with it. The idea of starting to cast blame within hours of something having happened is in fact unseemly.
And Ambassador Holbrooke, does the United States in a situation like this go it alone, or does it gather the international community together as one, or as much of one as it can, and try and respond in that form?
Well, first of all, let me say that at this moment, we have to find out what happened down there. I used to work in that building and was there when it was attacked a few years ago. I know that area. My assistant has a cousin who's now missing in the building, and my thoughts are first for the enormous, unbelievable loss of life and tragedy that's going on in Lower Manhattan. Beyond that, Aaron, on your question, this requires a unified international response by all the key member states of the world community, including, very importantly, Russia. And as for the interview you just broadcast by the foreign minister from the Taliban, let's be clear on his attempts to disassociate himself from Osama bin Laden. We don't know at this point who did this, but it was well coordinated and done with a degree of skill which exceeds anything. I think Bob Gates will know better than me, but I think, Bob, this is the most skillful, murderous attack ever in terms of coordination. And I want to be very clear on this. Bin Laden himself, as you just suggested, Bin Laden has said that the Taliban leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar, is the true spiritual leader of the Muslim world. He said that Afghanistan is the purified Islamic State equivalent to Mecca and Medina. And in a tape that the New York Times wrote about 2 days ago, he urged Muslims everywhere, and I'm quoting the New York Times, to migrate to Afghanistan to support the Taliban, saying it's their duty to God, and saying there's now finally a Muslim state that destroys falsehoods and does not succumb to the American infidel and is led by the true believer, Mullah Mohammed Omar, and so on and so forth. So what I want to stress here is that any nation, and this goes for the Taliban and their henchmen in Afghanistan, any nation in the world that harbored anyone associated with this must be treated as though they were part of what is effectively an active war against the United States. And they cannot hide behind the traditional definitions of difficulty. In the past, we've tried to get Osama bin Laden. He's evaded capture. He almost got killed by a bombing raid 2 or 3 years ago. And I think starting with Afghanistan, we're going to have to hold everyone accountable on the who might have sheltered anyone associated with this act.
So we don't simply, in this conversation, we don't simply hold the group itself, whoever it is, the group itself accountable. We hold anyone accountable, any country, any government accountable if they did nothing to stop it.
Any country which shelters, evades, or helps these people and their cohorts evade capture and the retribution they deserve is, in my view, functionally culpable of the events that took place in New York and Washington and elsewhere today, and must be so warned. I'm not accusing the Taliban specifically at this point because we don't know who did it.
Correct.
But all the evidence points to a connection between Osama bin Laden and Taliban leaders, and an attempt on the Taliban's part to, as the New York Times put it 2 days before this attack, call it as a ploy. And that is a quote from the New York Times before this happened. So I just want to underscore again, we are going to need the support of all our allies in Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, and any other country that might have in the past flirted with playing both sides of the street. Nothing like this has happened in American history. The full dimensions of it are still not clear to anyone, but I think we all can imagine it's going to be heart-wrenching in its dimensions as it becomes fully apparent, and we're not going to be able to leave countries playing two sides here. And I'm sure my friend Bob Gates would not disagree with that.
Let me, Mr. Gates, I want to come back to you. Mr. Holbrook, stay with us for a minute. I believe now we have the president. This is the president on tape a few moments ago. Well, obviously we're having a technical problem. Let me just tell you what, again, the president said in what has been his second statement. His first statement came after the first attacks here in New York. Short time ago, the president said, we have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. He added, we make no mistake, said the president, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible. I think we're going to try and hear the president again. Here we go. Yeah. This is coming to us from the broadcast pool. It's traveling with the president. Obviously, it's a very chaotic day, as you can imagine. A horrible tragedy has taken place, and people are working very hard to get stuff done and get it done right. And obviously, the pool is having trouble feeding the tape. But again, the president said, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Cowardly acts, I think it's fair to say we don't quite have our arms around the magnitude of it all.
I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status. And we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush, a short time ago, in his second remarks of the day, the president initially was headed back to the White House, and a decision was made, a security decision was made to divert the flight. And so the president will not go back to Washington, at least not yet. When he will return, perhaps John King can tell us. Our senior White House correspondent joins us now. John? John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I hear you fine. Do you have any word on when the president will come back?
No, we do not. As you reported, we were told earlier in the day the #1 priority was the president's safety. The #2 priority was to get him back to the White House because they believed that would send a powerful political statement. But as the president was on his way back from Florida, we are told by sources a security decision was made that at this time not to bring him back to Washington. So he was brought, and we won't disclose his exact location for security reasons, he was brought to one of several military installations in the United States that is equipped, we are told, with a very sophisticated command and control bunker, very much like the equipment that would be available to the president here at the White House in the White House Situation Room. We are also told that national security team members are still in the White House Situation Room, and earlier today, at least as of a little more than an hour ago, Vice President Cheney as well, directing operations and monitoring things from there. But the president obviously deciding not to come directly back to Washington. We are told that is for security reasons, delivering the statement you just heard. He has been in touch with congressional leaders, and we are told leadership members of the U.S. Congress are also being taken to an undisclosed location for their security. So we're trying to get more information on that, and we will bring that to you as soon as we have it. Aaron?
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King. Peter Bergen, CNN's Peter Bergen has been tracking the government of Afghanistan for some time, and he was listening in a few moments ago when the Taliban spokesman was speaking. Peter, first of all, what did you hear? Was there anything that perhaps the rest of us might not have heard, any nuance in what you heard? Why don't you start there?
Well, we just heard from the Foreign Minister, Wakil Mutawakil, who's, relatively speaking, a moderate of the Taliban movement. He basically repeated what I think is a standard Taliban line we've heard for the past at least couple of years, which is that Osama bin Laden isn't a terrorist and that he's being contained by the Taliban and that he's not able to conduct political or military missions. This, unfortunately, is really a false statement since Osama bin Laden has been fingered by both Yemeni and U.S. authorities for the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen in October 2000. There isn't an indictment there yet. The FBI continues to investigate, but senior Yemeni officials and senior U.S. officials have said that he's the primary suspect. So we've seen that bin Laden was able to bomb 2 U.S. embassies in Africa in '98 within 9 minutes of each other. We've seen that bin Laden was able to blow a huge hole in the side of one of the most sophisticated warships in the U.S. Navy, the USS Cole in Yemen in October of last year. And unfortunately, he must be top of the list of the person sophisticated enough in terms of operations to bring off these kinds of terrible disasters we've seen today. If you're looking for who is the most likely suspect, he has to be it. You've got an operation in which several people appear to commit suicide. You've also got an operation in which people obviously had some skill in piloting planes. These are clearly attributes of his organization. We know that he has pilots in his organization. We've seen in several instances his members of his organization commit suicide in attacks. We've also seen a pattern of warnings in previous bin Laden attacks in which this fits. 9 weeks before the U.S. embassy bombings in Africa in August of '98, bin Laden held a press conference in Afghanistan talking about, quote, good news in coming weeks. A few months before the USS Cole was bombed in Yemen, a videotape circulated around the Middle East in which bin Laden was wearing a Yemeni dagger, which he's never done in previous photographs, and one of his number two called for attacks on U.S. targets in Yemen. Just recently, there's been a videotape floating around the Middle East in which bin Laden, a very confident bin Laden, calls for attacks on the United States, says that the victory of Yemen, referring to the USS Cole attack, will continue. People that I've talked to are familiar with the bin Laden organization, said that the threats on this tape were very serious, that there was an imminent attack in the works. I spoke to somebody who was familiar with the organization a few weeks ago who made those statements to me. I had been very concerned about a potential attack as a result of this tape. It fits with the modus operandi, which is to talk about potential attacks coming up relatively soon without being particularly specific.
Peter, let me just interrupt you for a second. Our senior analyst, Jeff Greenfield, is here, and Jeff has a question. Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, Peter. If I'm not mistaken, you actually interviewed Osama bin Laden some years ago, correct?
Yeah, in '97 for CNN.
Now, at that time, what did he say about the notion of targeting civilians? I mean, what is the rationale behind targeting civilians for death and destruction?
Well, at that time, Jeff, he told us that because of the American military presence in the Middle East, that he was calling for attacks on U.S. soldiers. Now, he said if American civilians got in the way, that was sort of their problem. So at that time in '97, he was really only calling for attacks on American military targets. Later, that position evolved. By '98, he was calling for attacks on all Americans, whether civilian or military. I think the rationale behind that thinking is that, in his view, if you're an American taxpayer, you're subsidizing the anti-Islamic, quote, activities that he's against, whether that's in Saudi Arabia, with the American military presence there, or with America's support for Israel in the ongoing intifada. Jeff.
Peter, thank you for your work today. I suspect we'll get back to you, but we appreciate the background, which I think gives us some context for why the focus is again on bin Laden. But we should add that as we talk to you now, we can't be certain. We do not know that that's who is behind what has happened. What we do know is an extraordinary national tragedy has taken place, that someone is responsible, that the American government has promised to hunt down and punish, the president's words a short time ago, hunt down and punish whoever is responsible.
Do we have Director Gates still on the phone?
No, I don't believe.
I guess we do not. Because the question, obviously, we've already heard it with General Clark and at least one of the congressmen asking the question, how can an agency with an estimated budget of $26.5 billion a year not have known this? I think that's the first of many such questions we're going to be hearing.
Sandy Berger, who worked national security in the Clinton administration, and Richard Holbrooke, the former UN ambassador, back on the phone with us. Mr. Berger, give me a sense of what is going on in Washington right now. Who are the players at the table? Where is the table? And what are they doing?
Well, obviously the President of the United States is at the head of the table no matter where he is. But others around that table include the Secretary of Defense and Attorney General, head of the FBI, the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, because this may obviously involve international matters. I think we, in the midst of our outrage and indignation, we have to stay focused and stay determined here. The first job in this situation is rescue and to deal with what must be thousands of people here who are in peril. This is, in the first instance, a massive rescue operation. In the second instance, it's a security operation. We don't know what else may be part of this multifaceted operation. A number of precautions have been taken in the last few hours, and we have to obviously lock down as much as we can. And then the focus becomes detection. And I think that given the magnitude of this, given the fact that This has obviously involved multiple points of origin in the United States. It is inconceivable to me that we will not know relatively quickly when the dust settles who is responsible for this.
Now, Mr. Holbrook, Ambassador Holbrook, what has happened today is extraordinary. Give it a kind of historical context, the enormity of what's taken place.
Well, I think your coverage has made it more clear than anything else, although despite the superb efforts you've made, it hasn't yet become fully evident to your viewers what would be evident to any of us like myself who worked in the World Trade Center. I was there in the last bombing, as I mentioned earlier, that the number of people in that area, including the Chambers Street subway stop, which goes right under the World Trade Center, means that the dimensions of it exceed by a factor of probably 100 any previous incident, including Oklahoma City and the previous World Trade Center in American history. And one must be ready for news that will be very, very grim indeed for all of us as individuals who will have friends and relatives there, and for all Americans. And there will be additional consequences. This is the financial center of the world. The buildings in that area, all of which have now been evacuated, whose infrastructures may be threatened by gas and electrical line degradation, could affect, at least temporarily, the financial markets as well, although I would leave that to Treasury, and Sandy Berger listed the people at the table. I'm not sure if Sandy mentioned the Treasury Secretary, but I'm sure the Treasury and the Fed are well aware of the implications of orderly movement and capital transfers. Now, looking beyond that, Aaron, I think we have to go back to the fact that everyone has talked about the possibility of this kind of thing for a long time, and we faced lesser but similar attempts. This exceeded, apparently, the expectations of the intelligence experts, and we will learn more about that in the weeks to come. But I need to underscore one point. To find the people responsible is going to take a unified international effort. No one nation, not even the United States, can do it on its own. And we must have the full cooperation of the Russians, of the states in the Middle East, because I think the assumption that that's the region where this was planned is pretty solid. And I repeat this again, any nation that is seen to have harbored or abetted or sheltered any of these people must be treated as co-equally responsible. They cannot hide behind the facade we just saw in the remarks of the Taliban foreign minister. And Peter Bergen's extraordinarily insightful explanation a few minutes ago on CNN, I think, is the first real glimpse into that the viewers have had into how dangerous this is. If the Taliban shelters Osama bin Laden, as they do, and if Osama bin Laden is responsible for this, as I think almost everyone is going to suspect, then the Taliban must be held equally responsible for what has happened today.
Jeff?
And Ambassador Holbrook, what can, I would like you to be specific. What does that mean? Are you talking about a retaliatory strike against Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's Jeff.
It's Jeff Greenfield. I'm sorry,
Hi, Jeff. No.
Is that what you mean? That if put the links together?
No, Jeff. Let me be very frank, and I don't want to lapse into bloody-minded verbal excesses at a moment of high emotion. But let's be very blunt about this. If a country or regime, the Taliban, or some other regime to be determined by the intelligence community, has sheltered people who played a role in this, they cannot hide behind the attributes of they didn't know it, they had nothing to do with it. They must cooperate in the pursuit of the people responsible. And since the Taliban, a leader, has been publicly proclaimed by Osama bin Laden as the present spiritual leader of the Muslim world, I'm referring to bin Laden's declaration that Mullah Muhammad Omar is the rightful leader of the spiritual leader of the Muslim world, something he said on tape, quoted by John Burns in the New York Times 2 days ago. And if, in fact, these people are in some degree of collusion, I personally believe, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I personally believe that the Taliban should be regarded as co-equally responsible for this, and therefore, if and when we consider military action, it is fully justified, and the Taliban should face the same consequences.
Ambassador, thank you. Just quickly, if we can, one last question to Sandy Berger. When you were at the table, in honesty, did you ever anticipate the magnitude, an attack of this magnitude, which has taken place, just to remind people, not just in this city, in New York, not just in the capital, Washington, but on a number of airliners flying across the country as well? Was the planning that broad? Was the fear that great?
Well, I think for some time we have known that we are vulnerable to a serious attack. A multiple attack was thwarted, as you recall, during the Millennium New Year. But I think this, certainly exceeds in scope anything that intelligence community anticipated, and is as I said, an extraordinarily sophisticated operation to carry out something like this from various sites in the United States relatively simultaneously without detection. And whoever has perpetrated this has declared war on the United States, and we will have to respond accordingly. But I would also caution here that we should be careful about jumping to certitude about what happened here. We'll know this soon enough, and we'll also be able to find out why this was not detected.
I think that's just an extraordinarily important point, that what is going on right now at this moment is more important than why it happened. And what is going on is you have thousands of people, we presume in a number of different places, whose lives are at risk, who have been hurt, who need to be rescued, who need to be treated, who need to be taken to hospitals. In New York, in northern New Jersey, where the bulk of the injured are being treated here, there is a critical shortage of blood. Hospital officials are desperately seeking help there. And as Mr. Berger said, time enough later to figure out who and how we deal with it. Ambassador Holbrooke, Sandy Berger, thank you both for joining us. William Rodriguez, I just was looking down. There are literally down below us by Madison Square Garden, which is where we're located, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people on the corner, and they are just looking out. And from where they are, they can't see very much but the smoke. And I can't tell you if something has happened, but and it's lunch hour here, and there's just a lot of people, as there have been all morning, looking at a street that is almost empty. As New York, the southern part of New York, Penn Station by the Garden, essentially being evacuated to allow emergency crews to get to the scene. William Rodriguez is a maintenance worker at the Trade Center, I believe. In any case, he's on the phone with us now. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Tell me where you were when, well, which of the two buildings were you in?
I work on the building one, the one that got hit the first time.
Tell me what happened.
I was on the basement, which is a support floor for the maintenance company, and we hear like a big rumble, not like an impact, like a rumble, like something like moving furniture on a massive way, and all of a sudden we hear another rumble, and a guy comes running into our office, and all his skin was off his body. All his skin, we went crazy. We started screaming. We told him to get out. We took everybody out of the office outside to the loading dock area, and then I went back in. And when I went back in, I saw people. I heard people that were stuck on an elevator, on a freight elevator, because all the elevators went down. And water was going in, and they were probably getting drowned. And we get a couple of pipes and opened the elevator, and we got the people out. I went back up, and I saw one of the officers from the Port Authority Police. I've been working there for 20 years, so I knew him very well. My routine on the World Trade Center is in charge of the staircase. And since there was no elevator service, I had the master key for all the staircase doors. So I went up with the police officer and a group of firemen. As we went up, there was a lot of people coming down, and while we got, it was very difficult to get up.
Mr. Rodriguez, how much time has elapsed here in this, as you recount the events? Did it seem like hours, minutes, seconds?
No, it wasn't hours.
But what did it seem like?
Well, there was a big time, like a gap. There was a gap of time. I won't be able to tell you if it was 15, 20 minutes, but it was a gap of time. We heard while we were on the 33rd floor, I'm sorry, on the 27th floor, because we stopped there with the fire department because the equipment was very heavy and they were breathing very hard. They took a break because they couldn't continue going up, so they wanted to take a break.
Yeah.
And we have a person on a wheelchair that we were going to bring down on a gurney, and a lady that was having a problem with a heart attack, and some other guy that was breathing hardly. And we went a couple of floors up while they were putting the person in the gurney, got up to the 39th floor, and we heard on the radio that the 65th floor collapsed.
Right,
heard it collapsed.
Mr. Rodriguez, let me stop you there at the 65th floor. And let me add, you're a lucky man, it seems like today. Thank you for joining us. Matt Cornelius, you were on the 64th floor, 65th floor?
65th floor, yeah, that's where I work.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I arrived at work a little bit early today.
What do you do?
And I work for the Port Authority in the aviation department. And I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash. And the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I mean, we figured either an airplane had hit it or our first instinct was airplane. And everyone started screaming and said, you know, move away from the windows and let's get out of here. And we saw debris fall past the window on the north side.
How much, just to help our viewers kind of orient themselves, you're on the 65th floor of a building that is how many stories?
I believe it's 110.
So 50 stories above you, this has taken place.
I imagine so.
Okay.
We really had no idea at all what had happened until we exited the building. I mean, I had no idea the magnitude. Just took the stairs. I believe I actually was in the stairs as that same man, because I remember I saw the person in the wheelchair. We made it pretty fast down to 40th floor, and then from there the smoke got a little bit thick, and it was a lot slower. We maybe made a floor about every 2 minutes.
And how many people are in this group with you?
Well, there was just one other person that I worked with that was with us. It was packed. I mean, it was a virtual traffic jam in the staircase, up and down, I guess. It was very full.
People screaming?
No, actually, everyone maintained calm really well. I was impressed with that. I think for some people, it brought back memories of the bombing. People had been there before when that happened. But I was amazed, really. We got in the stairway, we were moving down. When the fire department were coming up, they'd say, you know, move to the left. Everyone moved to the left. And everyone complied. A couple people started crying a little bit, but you know, we said we're going to get out of here. We just got to focus and take it one step at a time.
Was it noisy, or was there screaming?
No, it was
quiet. Was it eerie?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't quiet. I mean, people were talking. In fact, someone was laughing. I kept hearing that, and I thought that was strange. But it was pretty normal. It wasn't. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, all we knew was something major had happened. Exactly, but we didn't really understand the full severity of the situation. So people weren't panicking. Once we got down to they put us on the plaza level, which was disturbing because there was a lot of debris in the plaza level and a lot of carnage, basically. We then moved out the back towards Broadway, and they said, the police were saying, don't look back, don't look back. And of course, I made it about half a block, and I looked back, and I saw the other tower on fire, and I couldn't believe it. And
Were you terrified?
Yeah, when we were stuck in that stairway, I mean, we stopped every now and then. It started to get nervous, but we never had any fear of the building collapse. I mean, we had no idea what was going on. So once I got out, and it's still sinking in, the real full severity of it. I mean, it's just an awful thing.
That's true of everybody.
Yeah, so.
Lucky man.
I am very lucky. I thank God very much.
Just owe you money. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Very much. Thank you. In Washington, D.C., thank you, man. Yeah. They have declared a state of emergency. Do we have a guest there, or? Okay. Washington has declared Washington, D.C. a state of emergency. I believe I was just told that the Space Needle in Seattle has been closed down. Is that correct? Did I hear you guys? There are a couple of points we might make there. Back in the year 2000, just before New Year's Eve, coming into Washington State, a man was stopped with explosives, and as it turned out, that was a part of a planned terrorist attack, and it caused the city of Seattle to shut down what had been an enormously elaborate Millennium celebration. They are very much on edge in Seattle. We were just there last week, and it's not surprising to me that they would shut that building down. Elise Marcos is an official with New York City Hospitals, and she joins us. He joins us now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you okay.
I apologize for the stuttered introduction. Tell me the situation in the hospitals.
Well, at Bellevue Hospital, which is the largest public hospital in the city, and is relatively near the incident, we have, as of now, received approximately 30 patients. 2 are dead, unfortunately. Some have brain injuries, very serious fractures, and we are now getting more patients from other hospitals that need microsurgery or implantation of limbs and plastic surgery. So it is a rather overwhelming situation here.
Mr. Marcos, you were outside the buildings in that period between the planes hitting and the buildings collapsing. Can you tell me what you saw?
Well, as president of the public hospitals, I was asked immediately within seconds to join the crisis assistance unit, which is located across the street from the World Trade Center. So I drove there, and as I was parking, a huge piece of rock hit the back of the car, broke the windshield where I was sitting, so I'm very lucky to be alive. Then when I went to the center was evacuated because they were afraid that a second plane may be coming. I joined the fire commissioner, and then I needed to use the telephone because cellular phones were not working. I went into, I think, American Express building, and as I was there, one of the buildings collapsed, and we were unable to leave that building, and thanks to a very brave police officer who was able to find an exit, we are here today.
Mr. Marcos, we heard reports that people were jumping out of the building. Did you see that?
Unfortunately, I saw about 5 people jumping from up the building, and I can tell you there's no other, I've never had such an overwhelming and terrible experience in my life, although I've been in this job for a long time and I've seen a lot of things. It's just something that is very hard to describe. But at the same time,
police officer Lim, I know he didn't make it because as I came out of the building, I saw a lot of bodies on the floor. I saw a lady encrusted on the floor. That's probably one of the persons that jumped from the building, if he jumped from the building. But it was like he melted on the floor. That's how bad it was. As I came out of the building, we hear the rumbling, and I was told, run. When I look up, everything is coming down, and I start running as fast as I could, and we all jumped under one of the fire trucks, right on time, because everything just came right on top of us. We could have been crushed because the truck was coming down on us, and all of a sudden it stopped, and we were pulled out from under the truck. But I know these officers didn't make it.
Mr. Marcos, Mr. Martinez, thank you for the extraordinary descriptions of what was going on in and around the buildings, excuse me, around 9 o'clock this morning, a little before 9, and a little after 9 here in New York. We've heard a number of references today. Certainly the first thing we thought of as we were coming in to the February 93 attack on the World Trade Center. And as horrible as that was, and it was, 6 people died that day. Many hundreds were injured, but 6 people perished. It is not reasonable to believe that the numbers will be anything like that. They will be far, far worse. And I think we're just beginning to get a sense of the magnitude. CNN's Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we're listening to your reporting and the people you've been talking with. I have to say in stunned silence, none of us ever seen anything close to the magnitude of this horrific events of this morning. Just to quickly recap, 4 commercial airplanes in the United States, 2 United Airlines, 2 American Airlines, have crashed. We know 2 of them went into, and you can see the flights here, American Airlines Flight 11 leaving Boston on the way to Los Angeles. This is one of the planes, American Airlines 77 Dulles to Los Angeles. That plane, that second plane, believed to have crashed into the Pentagon, but again, that's not confirmed. The first American Airlines flight believed to have crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. United Airlines Flight 93 leaving Newark on the way to San Francisco, believed to have crashed in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And finally, another United Airlines flight believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center. In all, horrific, not just damage, but surely loss of life. It's far too early to know victims, the number of victims, the number of casualties. We do have some information we want to share with you. In addition to what you're seeing in New York City, one of those planes, as we said, crashed into the Pentagon. We're going to be taking you there in a moment to our correspondent, Bob Franken. But we want to let you know what we're learning, what our correspondents are learning, that in the last little while, 5 battleships, some of them destroyers, we know have left Norfolk and have moved out of port in order to be deployed for security reasons along the east coast of the United States. In addition, 2 aircraft carriers that were based in Norfolk, in the Norfolk area, have been moved out to sea and on their way to New York, to the New York area. Now, we don't have much more information than that. We were originally told they were just leaving port for safety reasons, for security reasons. We're now told that very specifically the mission of the aircraft carriers is to move into the New York area. The mission of the battleships to be deployed along the East Coast. And of course, as we get more information, we'll share that with you. As I turn to Bob Franken at the Pentagon, I just want to tell you, President Bush, we can tell you now, has been at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He's now leaving that site on his way to an undisclosed location. Authorities telling us that they will not tell us where he is headed. Secretary of State Powell, the same story there, on his way back to the United States from a conference in Peru to an undisclosed location, and leaders of the United States Congress, both parties and both houses of Congress, moved to an undisclosed location. Now to our correspondent at the Pentagon, Bob Franken, who is, I believe, at a safe distance there from what's been going on. Bob, please bring us up to date.
Well, we're on the east side of the Pentagon, as you can see, Judy, and you can see over my shoulder that smoke continues to billow, smoke that is sometimes thick, sometimes a little dissipated, but we're talking about 4.5 hours after a plane, it is described as probably being a jumbo jet-sized plane, crashed into the Pentagon about 9:20 this morning. We now want to show you what it looks like on the west side. This is video that was shot by Vito Maggiolo, who is an assignment editor and producer for CNN, who was able to get video. You can see that firefighters there are fighting in an area, rings 4, 5, and 6 on the west side of the Pentagon. Vito says that it was an area, in his estimation, that was about 30 yards wide and about 10 yards deep into the building. The Firefighting was hampered, he says, because inside the building, sprinklers, standpipes, other forms of hydrants were damaged. There's an estimate that several hundred firefighters and emergency workers are there at the Pentagon. We're also told, of course, that there have been evacuation efforts throughout the day. We can see those. We do not have an estimate on the number of casualties. I can tell you that from our vantage point, we have seen a constant parade of casualty units, military casualty units, civilian ambulances, fire engines, and the like going to the Pentagon. There, of course, have been casualties, but as I said, we don't have any sort of estimate about that now. Now, we do also have somebody to talk with us who was an eyewitness to the actual crash. He was watching from Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb over. His name is Tim Timmerman. Mr. Timmerman, are you with us right now?
I sure am.
You're a pilot. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was looking out the window. I live on a 16th floor overlooking the Pentagon, and it's a corner apartment, so I have quite a panorama. And being next to National Airport, I hear jets all the time, but this jet engine I heard was way too loud. I looked out to the south, to the southwest, and it came right down 395, right over Columbia Pike. And as it went by the Sheraton Hotel, the pilot added power to the engines. I heard it spool up a little more. And then I lost it behind a building, and then it came out, and I saw it hit right in front of it. It didn't appear to crash into the building. Most of the energy was dissipated and hitting the ground, but I saw the nose break up, I saw the wings fly forward, and then the conflagration took, just engulfed everything in flames. It was horrible.
What can you tell us about the plane itself?
It was a Boeing 757, American Airlines, no question.
You say that there was a Boeing, and you say it was a 757 or 767. It's hard.
757.
757,
yeah,
which
American
of course
Airlines.
is American Airlines, one of the new generation of jets, and of course,
it was not. It was so close to me. It was like looking out my window and looking at the helicopter. It was just right there.
We were told that it was. We were told that it was flying so low that it clipped off a couple of light poles on its way in.
That might have happened behind the apartments that occluded my view. And when it reappeared, it was right before impact. And like I said, I saw the airplane disintegrate and then just blow up into a huge ball of flames.
So there was a fireball that you saw.
Absolutely, and the building shook, and it was, quite a tremendous explosion.
What did you see after that?
Nothing but the flames. And I sat here and I took a few pictures out my window, and I noticed the fire trucks, and the response was just wonderful. Fire trucks were there quickly. I saw the area. The building didn't look very damaged initially, but I do see now, looking out my window, there's quite a chunk in it. But I think the blessing here might have been that the airplane hit before it hit the building, hit the ground. A lot of energy might have gone that way. That's what it appeared like.
Well, there is, of course, we've heard some discussion about the fact that it could have been worse had it actually gone a little bit higher and gone into what's called the ring, the center of this Pentagon,
exactly.
which is
Exactly.
This is a five-sided building.
Right. As you know, the rings are A, B, C, D, E. It has just caught the E ring on the outside, and that's why I felt it didn't look as damaged as it could be. It looked like on the helipad, which is on that side.
Right. Did you see any people being removed, any injured being removed, that type of thing?
No, sir. I'm up at about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little bit closer, and at that point I saw nothing like that.
Tim Timmerman, thank you very much. An eyewitness, Judy, to the crash. We still have no idea about the number of casualties. We know that there is a gaping hole on the west side of the Pentagon. As you can see, the smoke continues to billow. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, and of course our audience, no surprise, hospitals in the Washington area dealing with casualties from the plane crash at the Pentagon. We were told a few hours ago there's a blood shortage in the Washington area. Hospitals wanting people to know if you are in a position to donate blood, it would very much be needed and appreciated. And I just want to quickly say here, before we go to the site of the Pennsylvania crash, that the D.C. National Guard was having difficulty getting through to people that it needs to mobilize. And this specifically, this is information specific to the Washington, D.C. area. The D.C. Guard wants to alert the 372nd Military Police Battalion and its subordinate companies to report as soon as possible to the D.C. Armory. Now, we got this information just about half an hour ago, and there have been so many other stories and pieces of information coming in. We haven't been able to get this out, but we do want to get it out now. Perhaps it will do some good. Joining us now, I mentioned to you a moment ago that We have a correspondent on the scene of the airplane crash into the ground, we believe. I'm going to go to David Mattingly, CNN correspondent there in Pennsylvania. This is near Shanksville, Somerset County in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. David Mattingly, are you with us now?
Yes, Judy, I'm here, and we are outside of the town of Shanksville. And to give you some idea of what kind of countryside this is, to my left is a huge field of corn. To my right is a rolling green pastoral hill here at the edge of the Allegheny Mountains. One of the last places you would probably expect to be touched by the violence of an act of terrible terrorism like we have seen today. But people here in the area have reported that they saw a commercial airliner going overhead at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet with no landing gear down. They heard then a loud roar of an engine, at which point the jet climbed and then banked sharply to